Chapter 1061. Are you crazy? Chu Qing glared at Princess Yu Yan and said. Am I crazy? Are you crazy? How dare you scold me like this? Do you really think I am willing to marry such a useless person like you? Princess Yu Yan faintly raised her eyebrows, revealing some anger. If it weren't for your uselessness, I wouldn't have ended up in this state. Back then, it was clearly you and Mother who planned to have me pass on the message. How did it become my problem? The more Princess Yu Yan thought about it, the angrier she became. This matter actually had nothing to do with her before. She was just a messenger. How did it end up with her going to the kingdom of Dongzang to make peace with Chu Qing? Yu Yan, you are a princess who is going to make peace. Can you still go back now? Chu Qing also became angry. He put down his hand covering his face and said coldly, you will only be Commandery Prince Qing's woman in the future. You can't still think about Prince Chen, can you? In fact, Princess Chen is thousands of times more beautiful than you. You don't even deserve to carry her shoes. After saying that, Chu Qing looked Princess Yu Yan up and down, as if he was examining a not-so-beautiful commodity. Princess Yu Yan was both embarrassed and angry. Her face was completely red and she reached out her hand again, but this time, her hand was grabbed by Chu Qing. Princess Yu Yan, please conduct yourself with dignity. If you still want to live well, this prince will treat you well for the sake of your imperial mother. If you continue to cause trouble without reason, this prince will not be polite. The matter of you marrying this prince is a matter between the two countries. You have to marry me whether you want to or not. After saying that, he shook off Princess Yu Yan's hand hard and turned to get out of the carriage. There was silence in the carriage for a while, and then Princess Yu Yan's cry came out. The palace maid who followed her was frightened and hid aside, not daring to move. Now she hurried to persuade her, but she was also slapped several times. In the carriage in front, Princess Yu Tao laughed happily. It would be good if Yu Yan and Chu Qing fought. She wanted them to fight and scold every day, so that they could plot against her. If it were not for Prince Chen's reminder, she would almost be forced to do nothing at that time. Now it was really good, really good. Even if she had to go to the kingdom of East Song, it would be better than Yu Yan marrying Chu Qing. Chu Qing was a treacherous person. Back in the Su kingdom, people thought that he would be forced to marry Princess Yu Yan and would be at a disadvantage. It was really pitiful. But now, it seemed like it was a good thing. This pair, together, was indeed a match made in heaven, a pair made in heaven. Princess Yu Tao was secretly humming a tune in the front carriage. In the carriage at the front, Chu Luchen leaned on the soft couch, picked up a cup of tea in front of the table gracefully, took a sip, and put it down slowly. His carriage was very spacious, and it was covered with thick cushions. The journey was very smooth, and the water in the cup only rippled slightly. Master, there is a quarrel in the back. Xiao Xuanzi climbed up from the carriage and reported with a smile. Not bad, this is just the beginning. Chu Liuchen's delicate lips curled up, and he looked lazy. He was not surprised by this. At first glance, he could tell that this Princess Yu Yan was a restless woman. She should not have intended to marry Chu Qing at that time, and there should be other reasons for her to be close to Chu Qing. Chu Qing seemed to be kind and had a good character, but in fact, there was always ambition in his eyes, which was even no less than that of Chu Luyue and Chu Liuzhou. Chu Luchen was also curious about what kind of confidence supported his ambition. Even if there was no successor, it was impossible for his uncle to pass the throne to him. As a powerless little prince, how could he seize the world? What did he rely on to support his ambition? Since he had nothing to do, he was willing to see what exactly happened. He wanted to see how Chu Qing would realize his ambition, and it was even to the extent that he was willing to lend Chu Qing a hand so that Chu Qing could go further and get closer to the throne. Master, Ningyuan Army General asked if you would like to continue the journey today. Do you want to take a rest at this time? Xiao Xuanzi smiled. Of course, he knew his master's bad taste, so he stopped asking about this topic. At present, the matter between Commandery Prince Qing and Princess Yu Yan had just begun, and he was just a little eunuch following his master to watch the fun. He had to deal with his own affairs first and then go to watch the fun. Continue the journey. While I'm not here, they dare to bully my princess. Chu Liuchen's face turned cold, and the people around him immediately felt cold. The news from the capital city had come. Even if Xiao Wanru did not explain it in detail, it was clear at a glance what the truth was after the connection. They took advantage of his absence to bring the matter to Prince Chen's mansion. He had to reason with them. Yes, I know. I'll go and tell Ning Yuan Army General now. Xiao Xuanzi nodded repeatedly. Since something was going to happen to the princess, how could the prince not be anxious? It seemed that the journey would be more urgent. He didn't know who was so ignorant in the capital city that they actually schemed against the prince and the princess. Wanted the prince to marry Princess Yutao. These people really thought that the prince was the kind of person who could be manipulated by them. Thinking of the news from the capital city, Xiao Xuanzi also had a lingering fear. If something really happened to the princess this time, the capital city would immediately be in a bloody storm. Not to mention the capital city, even the imperial palace would be the same. No one could stop the prince, even concubine Lan in the imperial palace. Thinking of this, Xiao Xuanzi's heart trembled. He hurriedly got out of the car and went to Ning Yuan Army General, hoping that there would be no more schemes against the princess or the prince's mansion in the capital city. These people didn't understand the status of the princess in the prince's heart. For so many years, the prince didn't even take care of his own health. Since he had the prince took good care of his health. It could be said that with the princess, there was the current prince. The princess slowly pulled the prince up from the darkest abyss. If something happened to the princess, Xiao Xuanzi didn't dare to think about it. It was better to go to Ning Yuan Army General first. Passing by Princess Yu Yan's carriage behind, Xiao Xuanzi heard the sudden loud cry. He shook his head. The prince only had the princess in his heart. No matter how happy and pitiful Princess Yu Yan was, it would not arouse the prince's feelings at all. Even if she cried to him, the prince wouldn't care. Hearing Xiao Xuanzi conveyed Chu Liuchen's feelings, Qin Huayong helplessly asked people to tighten the horses and continued to move forward. Seeing that the prince didn't intend to rest, he also accompanied him. He glanced at Commandery Prince Qing who was sitting on the horse with him, and there was a little sympathy in his eyes. In his eyes, Princess Yu Yan's behavior these days was obviously not a good person. Chu Qing married an ancestor, and it was an ancestor who was restless in the house. But it was also Chu Qing's fault. He had been quite close to Princess Yu Yan before. Since they met, they seemed to have fallen in love at first sight. Now that things had come to this, he had brought this upon himself. Perhaps it was Princess Yutao's plot, but so what? Chu Qing had behaved inappropriately and had an ambiguous relationship with Princess Yu Yan for a long time. Prince Chen's mansion, which had been closed for a few days, finally opened its gate. A large carriage drove out of Prince Chen's mansion. Many spies who paid attention to Prince Chen's mansion immediately reported to their respective masters. Princess Chen went out of the mansion. This large carriage belonged to Princess Chen. It was said that it was specially customized by Prince Chen for Princess Chen. As expected, Princess Chen was fine. She had really fallen ill before. After getting the exact news, all the forces ordered their subordinates not to act rashly and to wait and see. The previous incident had attracted the attention of the emperor, so all the forces did not dare to act rashly in Prince Chen's mansion. Xiao Wanru went to Butterfly Clothing Shop, which she hadn't been to for a long time. After entering Nanny Dong's accounting room, she took off her curtain hat. Nanny Dong hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Nanny Dong, have you been busy these days? Xiao Wanru asked with a smile. She had been very careful because she was afraid that others would know what had happened in Butterfly Clothing Shop. Well, he still sends someone here from time to time. Now he either keeps an eye on me or specially sends some things here. Nanny Dong sighed and looked very conflicted. Nanny Dong, do you want to be with him? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said calmly. I don't want to be with him anymore. Wasn't it enough for me to be like this at that time? But he actually found Xiao. Wei Dahai found Xiao. Nanny Dong frowned more and more. Xiao is soft-hearted and actually thinks that he is pitiful. The more Nanny Dong thought about it, the angrier she became. It was obvious that Wei Dahai had wronged her and her mother, but now Xiao thought that she was hard-hearted and couldn't tolerate Wei Dahai's legal wife, making it seem that she was unfaithful. Thinking of Xiao's words, Nanny Dong's eyes turned red. She had raised Xiao for so many years, and no one could understand the hardships she had gone through during this period. She only hoped that her daughter would grow up well, but she didn't expect that Xiao didn't understand her. She even cried and said that she was narrow-minded and couldn't tolerate others. She also blamed her for saying that Xiao was a good daughter of an official, but she had wandered outside with her and lived so many hard days. Xiao wants to recognize Wei Dahai. Xiao Wanru knew what Nanny Dong meant as soon as she saw her appearance. She sighed secretly in her heart. When Dong Xiao had that kind of thing, it could be seen that Dong Xiao was not a smart girl. Moreover, she was soft-hearted and easily believed others' words, not to mention that the person in front of her was her biological father. However, she didn't expect that because of this biological father who didn't recognize them before, she had hurt the heart of her biological mother, who really loved her dearly. Wei Dahai seemed to be a man of means. When the hard way failed, he used the soft way, and he directly targeted his biological daughter, Dong Xiao. Xiao Wanru slightly pursed her lips as she used Dong Xiao to force Nanny Dong to marry into the Wei's mansion. She had an intuition that Nanny Dong was not the ultimate goal. Nanny Dong, do you think that Wei Dahai really wants to treat you well? Xiao Wanru smiled in a low voice and asked leisurely. Now it was up to Nanny Dong to decide what to do. Chapter 1062. Qianqian. The latest chapter on medical skills of the Crown Princess was updated as soon as possible. Your Highness, I don't think Wei Dahai is so kind. Madame Dong gritted her teeth and said. She wished Wei Dahai would die, but she had to take Xiao's thoughts into consideration. He obviously wants this butterfly clothing shop. Why do you think so? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows, tilted her head and asked in a charming tone. Your Highness, think about it. If he really wants me, he wouldn't have cared about me at the beginning. Now so many years have passed, how could he think of me again? As for Xiao, it's even more impossible. He doesn't lack a daughter or a son. Xiao is not outstanding and married into an ordinary family, so there's nothing for him to covet. I think it's this shop that makes him jealous. Madame Dong analyzed rationally. And why did his madam agree to let me enter the Wei's mansion? If it weren't for interests, she wouldn't have agreed. I've seen this madam before, and she is not a gentle and obedient woman. Wei Dahai seems to listen to her a lot. There must be a great benefit for her to tolerate me. I don't have anything else, but this shop may be attractive to them. What do you think we should do, Madame Dong? Xiao Wanru said with a calm smile. Madame Dong was indeed rational and knew what she wanted to do, but Dong Xiao was clingy and unclear. If Xiao says it again, I'll give up the position of the shopkeeper of Butterfly Clothing Shop and say that this shop doesn't belong to me. Just say it and see what Wei Dahai says. Madame Dong said angrily. Thinking of her disappointing daughter, she was about to cry again. She had been wandering for half of her life, and she only had one daughter. She really cared about her daughter, but she didn't expect that her daughter was now full of Wei Dahai and wanted to go to the Wei's mansion to live the life of a Mississippi. She didn't think that even if she entered the Wei's mansion, she would have nothing to do with it. As a married woman, did she still want to rely on the Wei's mansion? Madam, do you think Xiao has already told Wei Dahai what happened behind the shop? Xiao Wanru's long eyelashes flickered and asked. No, this won't happen. Madame Dong shook her head decisively and said, Princess, don't worry. Xiao won't do that. I have repeatedly told Xiao, or not to tell anyone about this. If I tell anyone else, I may even get killed. Madame Dong had no choice but to threaten Dong Xiu'er, for fear that she would accidentally ruin Xiao Wanru's plan. Xiao Wanru nodded and understood Nanny Dong's intention. She also knew that Dong Xiu'er was timid. After being scared by Nanny Dong, at least at this time, she had not told Wei Dahai the truth. Wei Dahai was a very unusual person. In the last life, Madame Dong should have entered the palace by relying on Wei Dahai's connections. She even brought her business to the Empress Dowager. It could be seen that Wei Dahai was not only a clever person, but also had deep connections. Hearing that Wei Dahai's background was not unusual, it was even more strange. How could he casually arrange people around the Empress Dowager? Or it could be said that someone around the Empress Dowager treated him very well. Xiao Wanru was more interested in another person, Mo Chui. Mo Chui, who had stayed in the Yuhui nunnery for 5 years, was said to be a member of the Yuhui nunnery and had been living in the Yuhui nunnery since then. Such a person should have been unknown, just like she had been in the Yuhui nunnery for so many years. However, at present, this person's identity had changed dramatically. First of all, this person became Wei Dahai's niece. 3 years ago, she was taken down the mountain and raised in the Wei's mansion. What was more surprising was that Chu Qing's fiancé turned out to be her. This was something that no one had expected. Xiao Wanru got the news from Chu Luqian. Hearing this news, she could hardly believe it. Mo Chui turned out to be Mo Chui. Who would have thought that an orphan girl raised in the Yuhui nunnery without parents would become Chu Qing's fiancé? At that time, Chu Qing refused to marry Xiao Nu for this reason. The emperor didn't agree at first, but for some reason, he agreed later. Although Chu Qing's identity was awkward, he was still the son of the former emperor. If he married such an unknown princess, people would feel that he had mistreated the son of the former emperor. However, Chu Qing argued strongly, and in the end, it was left unsettled. Because the identity of the future commandery Prince Qing was too low, no one paid attention to it. If Xiao Wanru hadn't been with Mo Chui in the Yuhui nunnery, she wouldn't have taken her seriously. Especially when Mo Chui begged her grandma to take her down the mountain with a fellow villager, Xiao Wanru paid more attention to her. At that time, Xiao Wanru easily realized that there was no fellow villager at that time. It was obvious that Chu Qing was going to come down the mountain and appear in front of everyone. If it was caused by her grandma, the emperor would definitely abandon her grandma. Although Xiao Wanru wasn't clear about the grudge between the emperor and the former emperor, she felt that the emperor would definitely not be willing to see the sons of the former emperor emerge one after another. Chu Luqian had no choice. He was born early and was known to the world. As for other people, the emperor didn't intend to recognize them at all. Although Chu Qing was not a big deal, the emperor obviously didn't want to mention the past again. It was better for Chu Qing not to appear in front of the world. Mo Chui, who had schemed against her grandma in such a way, was really not like an ordinary woman. No matter how she looked at it, it seemed to be mysterious. Did it mean that Mo Chui had an ulterior motive when she came to the Yuhui nunnery? At that time, she was still young and couldn't have arranged such a thing by herself. In that case, there must be someone behind her. Or it could be said that there was someone behind Chu Qing. Was this person Wei Dahai? Xiao Wanru couldn't figure it out at the moment. She was not in a hurry because Chu Luqian would deal with this kind of thing by himself. Now it seemed that Wei Dahai couldn't bear it anymore and wanted to get involved in her butterfly clothing shop. Nanny Dong, you can give me the shop. Xiao Wanru suggested. Nanny Dong didn't understand for a moment and looked at Xiao Wanru in a daze. Since the Wei's mansion wants you to be a co-wife, you can give me the shop and then marry into the Wei's mansion. In this way, Xiao won't blame you, right? Xiao Wanru said more clearly with a smile. Nanny Dong's face changed and she knelt down with a plop. Your Highness, I don't want to marry into the Wei's mansion. I don't want to marry Wei Dahai, the heartless man, and I don't want Xiao to be harmed. The Wei's mansion was obviously a tiger's den. Only Xiao thought it was a rich den. Nanny Dong, get up first and talk, Xiao Wanru said softly. Yu Jie went over and helped Nanny Dong up. Your Highness, what do you mean? Nanny Dong stood up, thought for a while, and asked hesitantly, make a big fuss first and then see Wei Dahai's reaction, or Wei Dahai's wife's reaction. Nanny Dong, if you spread the news that you want to transfer the shop to me, will Wei Dahai react? Xiao Wanru asked with a deep look in her eyes. Her long eyelashes blocked a trace of deepness in her eyes, making her look harmless and gentle. If I spread the news that I want to transfer the shop to you, Your Highness, Wei Dahai will definitely not sit still. Nanny Dong was a smart person. She immediately understood the meaning of Xiao Wanru's words and said with joy, he will definitely make me not transfer the shop, or even if I transfer the shop, I will transfer it to the person he introduced. If the shop is gone, he will have no desire for me. At that time, Xiao can see clearly what kind of person he is. At the mention of Dong Xiao Madame Dong was angry and hurt. That silly girl really thought that she had found a good father. She tried to persuade her again and again and even thought that her husband was not good. As the daughter of an official, she could have married a better man. But she just wanted to find a better man, divorce him, and marry another young master from a rich family. Thinking of Xiao's things, Nanny Dong wanted to bite Wei Dahai to death. Can you do it, Nanny Dong? Xiao Wanru asked with a smile. She had to solve the problem of butterfly clothing shop. Chu Luyue and Infanta Yuan's people had their eyes on it. She was afraid that they would make trouble again, so she simply made it public and bought it in her name. In this way, Nanny Dong would not be able to deal with these people overtly and covertly. Before she got married, it was not convenient for her to run her own shop. Now that she was Princess Chen, it was not a big deal even if she asked someone to run the shop in person. Don't worry, Your Highness. I can do it. Nanny Dong nodded hard and was very grateful. At this time, she could only take drastic measures. Otherwise, Wei Dahai would never stop. As long as she thought that it was agreed by Wei Dahai's wife, Nanny Dong was so angry that she gnashed her teeth. How shameless the couple was. It was obvious that they coveted butterfly clothing shop, but they pretended to be deeply in love with each other, which was really disgusting. Fortunately, this shop belonged to the princess, and fortunately, the princess could always stand behind her and support her. When Xiao Wanru came out of the shopkeeper's room, the two servant girls behind her looked very angry. Although Nanny Dong sent her to the door of the accounting room and treated her like those noble madams and misses in the past, the two servant girls still looked very unhappy. Chu Lu snorted coldly and helped Xiao Wanru to leave first. No one could see Xiao Wanru's face clearly under the curtain hat, but everyone could see Chu Li's face clearly. When they entered the door and saw the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion just now, many people had guessed that the person in front of them was Princess Chen. Princess Chen, who had been keeping a low profile to recuperate in the mansion, attracted many people's attention at this time when they saw the two servant girls acting like this. They secretly guessed whether the shopkeeper of Butterfly Clothing Shop had offended Princess Chen. She could not be offended. When Infanta Yuan and Princess Chen had an affair before, she seemed to be here. At that time, both Infanta Yuan and her brother had suffered a loss. A small shopkeeper could not compare with Infanta Yuan. What was going on? Chapter 1063. Think about it. It's your great fortune that our princess likes your shop, Yu Jie said, walking at the end. Yu Jie walked at the end. After a few steps, she turned around and snorted at Madame Dong, who was smiling. She raised her head high and said, if it weren't for, our princess wouldn't be so polite. After that, she turned around and left. Her words were vague, and everyone looked at each other. At this time, no one dared to rush out to defend her, so they just watched the fun. They saw the smile on Nanny Dong's face turn into bitterness. Looking at Princess Chen's back, she turned around with a heavy body. In the afternoon, the shop assistants in Butterfly Clothing Shop were busy. They not only had to receive guests, but also had to count their belongings. They were very busy. Some guests wondered why they were counting these things at the end of the year. The assistant said that it was the shopkeeper's order. It seemed that they were going to close the shop. Nanny Dong sat in the accounting room and didn't come out. No one knew what she was doing inside. But it seemed that she was in a bad mood. She should be checking the account books, and of course, she might cry sadly. It should have something to do with Princess Chen in the morning, right? Even the assistants were talking about it in private. After hearing the news, Dong Xiao hurried back to Butterfly Clothing Shop. She was not married far away from Butterfly Clothing Shop. When she arrived at Butterfly Clothing Shop, she did not ask the waiter to lead the way. Instead, she knocked on the door of the accounting room. Nanny Dong opened the door. She looked a little tired and didn't look well. "Mother, what happened? Did Princess Chen say anything?" Dong Xiao said anxiously and flustered. She was very afraid of Xiao Wanru. Princess Chen, who was several years younger than her, had scared her 3 years ago. Therefore, Dong Xiao had never dared to disobey Princess Chen's orders. But she also knew that her mother's butterfly clothing shop originally belonged to Princess Chen. Why did Princess Chen come to Butterfly Clothing Shop to make trouble? If she wanted an explanation for what happened with Infanta Yuan and that day, wasn't Princess Chen the owner of Dai Chen? What explanation did she want? Madame Dong let Dong Xiao in and closed the door again. She turned around and sat behind the desk. She looked at Dong Xiao and sighed heavily. She did not answer Dong Xiao's question, but asked, "Xiao, do you really want me to enter the Wei mansion?" "Mother, you are the first wife. Why can't you marry into the Wei mansion?" Dong Xiao asked in confusion. She really could not understand her mother. First wife? Who will admit it? Madame Dong raised the corner of her mouth sarcastically. My father will admit it. He said that you are the only one in his heart. At that time, he had no choice but to let you be his concubine first. When the time is right, he will make you his wife. But why did you just leave? Dong Xiao wondered why her mother couldn't bear it for a while. So, he can only take me as his concubine now? Madame Dong sneered. Father said that he would marry you as his co-wife. This is his compensation for all these years. Even after so many years, he has been thinking about us. Mother, as long as you agree, we can reunite. Father looks very pitiful alone. Besides, he has worked so hard for so long for you and me. If we don't go back, how sad he will be. Dong Xiao increasingly disagreed with Madame Dong's idea. So many years had passed, and the past had long been forgotten. Why did her mother still hold on to such a thing? She could only say that no one could blame anyone for this kind of accident. Wei Dahai is pitiful. Madame Dong was so angry that her eyes turned red. What did Wei Dahai say to Xiao? How could she misunderstand him like this? He was forcing her to agree. If she didn't agree, even her only daughter would not understand her. Mother, Dong Xiao still wanted to persuade her, but Madame Dong had reached out and stopped her. Don't say anything. Just listen to him later. He is not pitiful. He will come later. Yes, father always cares about you, Dong Xiao said naturally. He doesn't care about me. He cares about this shop. Madame Dong unceremoniously lifted the veil. If it weren't for this butterfly clothing shop, do you think he would look at us more? Even if we begged in his house, he would give us 2 steamed buns at most. Madame Dong had seen through Wei Dahai's character. Mother, how can you say that to father? Dong Xiao's tears fell down. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Mother, even if you don't understand father, you shouldn't say that. It's not easy for father to find us for so many years. There are so many people. How can he find us? Besides, we didn't go to the capital city before. We went to Jiangzhou. Dong Xiao felt wronged for her father and felt that Madame Dong was really unreasonable. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and the two people inside immediately stopped talking. Madame Dong pointed to a large screen behind the chair and said, "Go sit in the back and listen to your good father's deal with me. Think about whether he is interested in us or the interests behind us." Dong Xiao-er wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and went inside unconvinced. Even if she listened, so what? Her father would not think so. It was her mother's fault. After Dong Xiao-er sat down on the chair prepared behind the screen, Madame Dong calmed down and went to open the door. As soon as the door opened, Wei Dahai's concerned face appeared behind the door. During this time, Wei Dahai sent people to deliver things from time to time, and sometimes he came in person. All the restaurants in the shop knew that Lord Wei had an unusual relationship with Madame Dong, so no one stopped him and let him go directly to Madame Dong's door. As soon as Wei Dahai saw Madame Dong's bad face, he immediately asked with concern, "Madame Ming, what happened?" Madame Dong turned around and entered the door, ignoring him. Wei Dahai followed them into the room and purposely closed the door. Madame Dong had already sat down behind the desk. There were several account books on the desk. Some were open, and some were not. It could be seen that Madame Dong had been sorting out the account books before. "What's wrong? Could it be that Princess Chen really made things difficult for you?" Wei Dahai asked with concern again. He picked up an account book and flipped through it. The more he flipped through it, the happier he was. The shop had made a lot of profits. At the moment, he was short of money. It was great to have such a sum of money in his account. "I want to give this shop to Princess Chen," Madame Dong said with a straight face, without looking at Wei Dahai. Wei Dahai stopped flipping through the account books and asked in surprise, "Why?" Madame Dong lowered her head and said with a depressed look, "Infanta Yuan and Princess Chen had a dispute here before. It's been a long time. I thought it was over. I didn't expect that Princess Chen wouldn't let it go. She asked me to give her an explanation and let me give this shop to her." It could be seen that she was in a bad mood. Princess Chen has gone too far. Wei Dahai slammed his hand on the table and said angrily, "Even if she is Princess Chen, so what? She can't snatch my shop by force," he said angrily. After that, he comforted Madame Dong, "Don't be afraid. I'll take care of it for you." "How can you take care of it? She is Princess Chen." Obviously, Madame Dong didn't believe him and said angrily. Wei Dahai stood up and paced around the room a few times. It happened so unexpectedly that he was overwhelmed for a while. If it were an ordinary official's wife, it would not be a big deal. But the problem was that this was Prince Chen's wife. Prince Chen was a very protective person. Even Infanta Yuan had suffered a loss, let alone him. Wei Dahai deeply felt that he didn't have enough power at the moment. "I'll sort out the account books and count the property. Then I'll give it to Princess Chen," Madame Dong said. "How much did she pay?" Wei Dahai asked subconsciously. 20,000 taels of silver. Madame Dong lowered her head more and more, and she looked listless. "What? Only 20,000 taels of silver? This shop's business is so good, but she only gave 20,000 taels of silver. Prince Chen's mansion has gone too far." Wei Dahai was furious and distressed. In his opinion, Madame Dong's money was his money. At this time, Princess Chen took advantage of her, which was like cutting off his flesh. He felt distressed no matter how he thought about it. No, he couldn't watch Madame Dong suffer such a loss. He rolled his eyes and suddenly thought of an idea. He returned to the chair and sat down. "Madame Ming, you can tell Princess Chen that this shop is not yours, but mine. Transfer it to my name. Since you are the shopkeeper I invited, then Princess Chen can't say anything about it. Say that this shop is yours." Madame Dong frowned and looked up at Wei Dahai with unclear meaning. Wei Dahai thought it was a good idea, so he immediately persuaded, "You only need to go to the Yamen now and transfer this shop to my name. After you marry into my family and become my wife, I'll let someone else take charge of the shop again. Don't you think it's a good idea?" The more Wei Dahai said, the more feasible he felt it was, and his eyes lit up. In this way, Princess Chen would not be able to rob his shop anymore. After all, robbing an ordinary shop like Madame Dong was different from robbing his own shop. No matter how arrogant Princess Chen was, she would not do such a thing. As for whether Madame Dong wanted to enter the mansion after the shop was transferred to her name, it was up to her. Anyway, he originally wanted this shop. With this shop that could make money, it would be more convenient for him to spend money. Thinking of this, Wei Dahai was full of smiles. Behind the screen, Dong Xiu had nodded repeatedly as she listened, but now she also had some doubts. She was just soft-hearted, but she was not really stupid. What her father said was so strange. How could he do things like this? It was completely opposite to the passionate words he used to say in front of her. Could it be that what her mother said was right? For a moment, she felt so distressed that she twisted the handkerchief in her hand tightly, for fear that she would make any noise. Madame Dong said in a deep voice, "The shop is given to you as my dowry. After I marry into the mansion, will the dowry be returned to me? Do we have to make a notarization of these words in the yamen? If you don't admit it, what will happen?" Madame Dong said in a deep voice. Madame Dong said in a deep voice, "Madame Ming, after you marry me, you will be my wife. In the future, you will live a life of luxury. There is no need to make a clear distinction. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. There is no need to make a notarization. A woman's dowry is originally your own, so there is no need to make an explanation." Xiu who was sitting in the back, felt her heart skip a beat, as if something had broken. Chapter 1064. Marry you? Then what about your original wife? Are you going to give up your position to me? Madame Dong sneered, "If I'm just a concubine, I don't seem to need a dowry." Of course, a concubine didn't need a dowry. If the dowry was good, she just needed to carry it. If the dowry was bad, she just needed to carry a parcel. There was no need to be so particular, let alone a shop as a dowry. Wei Dahai's face darkened and he said unhappily, "Mrs. Ming, of course, Madam is still Madam. You are not an ordinary concubine. You are a co-wife. Xiu will also be a legitimate daughter in the mansion. A co-wife is also a wife. Naturally, she will marry into the mansion. Your dowry will be yours in the end. Do you think I will covet your dowry?" Wei Dahai's face darkened and he said unhappily, "Since it's still mine, we need to be fair, in case we can't make it clear in the future." Madame Dong didn't give in. It seemed that she wouldn't give in until Wei Dahai relented. "Mrs. Ming, why are you so stubborn? If you are like this, how can Madam let you enter the mansion as a co-wife?" Wei Dahai stamped his feet and said anxiously. "Your wife doesn't want to." Madame Dong looked at him and said, "Didn't you say that your wife is very virtuous and wholeheartedly cares for you? She will like whatever you like, right?" Wei Dahai was stunned by this question. After a pause, he reluctantly explained, "At first, she only agreed to let you be a concubine. It was I who said that you still have a dowry, so it's not suitable for you to be a concubine. Then she relented. Mrs. Ming, you have to understand me. Although I want to marry you, I can't make the mansion restless and become a joke in the capital city. If I spoil my wife, I will be impeached by the censor. Do you mean that I am a concubine?" Madame Dong smiled, and her eyes became colder and colder. "I don't mean that. I mean you have a dowry. How can you be a concubine?" Wei Dahai was annoyed by Madame Dong's pestering, but he had to coax her. Madame Dong interrupted him rudely, "That is to say, I can only marry into your mansion with this dowry. Without this dowry, I'm just a concubine." Wei Dahai's face turned red. He glared at Madame Dong with shame and anger, and his face darkened. "Madame Ming, this is the capital, not the small place where you used to live. To open a shop in the capital, money is not enough. If you don't have a strong background, you will be swallowed up by others sooner or later. Just like what happened to Prince Chen today. If you marry me, I have the right to protect you and your shop. Why don't you understand that?" Madame Dong said coldly, Madame Ming, this is the capital, not the small place where you used to live. Behind the screen, Dong Xiu'er could no longer hold back her tears. She began to sob silently. What she really heard was completely different from what Wei Dehai had told her before. This was her so-called father. Sure enough, she was just a child brought up by her mother. She never knew she had a father, and she didn't want to have such a father. Madame Dong stood up, walked to the door, pulled it open, and said to the outside, if I have to be swallowed up by others, I would rather be Prince Chen than meet a villain like you who cheats me on my marriage. Your Excellency Wei, please. Her voice was not low, and the people outside the accounting room all heard it. Many people looked into the room in surprise and saw Wei Dehai. Wei Dehai suddenly stood up and said angrily with a red face, well, Madame Dong, you are so stubborn. Take care of yourself. After that, he swung his sleeves and strode away. Who is this? Ah. A female guest asked curiously about him. Your Excellency Wei, I heard that he is the ex-husband of our shopkeeper. He abandoned our shopkeeper and married a woman from a noble family. I don't know what he is doing now. A shop assistant curled his lips and said. These days, Wei Dehai sent people to deliver things to them from time to time, and he would come to please them. Everyone in the shop knew that. He's a heartless woman. Why did he come here again? An old maid followed her master here and asked curiously. He saw that our shopkeeper is running this shop and thinks that our shopkeeper has a good net worth. What kind of person is he? Such a heartless man has the face to come out. Now he covets his ex-wife's money. He's really a jerk. He's really not a jerk. Whoever marries this kind of person is really out of luck. Butterfly Clothing Shop bought clothes for women, and most of the customers were women. When they heard that Wei Dehai was such a person, many people couldn't help but scold him. If a woman got married and met such a greedy, heartless, and greedy man, she might as well not marry him. Therefore, they sympathized with Nanny Dong more and more. The current situation seemed to be very bad for Nanny Dong. If they really fell out, Wei Dehai didn't seem to be a good person, and he might play dirty tricks behind her back. How could a woman have the ability to support the shop? Butterfly Clothing Shop might be in trouble next. While everyone was talking, Nanny Dong closed the door and returned to the room. Mother. Dong Xiu'er came out from behind the screen, her face covered with tears. Nanny Dong felt a lump in her throat. She had brought up Dong Xiu'er with hardships. Others couldn't understand the pain a person had suffered, but she didn't feel it was bitter. As long as her daughter could understand her, it was okay. Mother, I was wrong. Dong Xiu'er walked to Nanny Dong, knelt down on both knees, held Nanny Dong's leg, and cried loudly. Originally, she thought that her biological father was sincerely repentant, but it turned out that he had deceived her. She didn't want to recognize such a father. Mother, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have thought that he was a good person and would treat us sincerely. Mother, I was wrong. Dong Xiu'er choked with sobs and was full of regret. Nanny Dong's tears flowed down uncontrollably. She reached out and patted Dong Xiu'er on the back. She choked with sobs and said, "It's the best that you can understand me. Today, I let you know that he has never been a good person. I'm afraid that you will be deceived by him." Dong Xiu'er wiped away her tears and said bitterly, "Mother, don't worry. I won't be deceived by him again and I won't believe his words again." Nanny Dong pulled her up from the ground, reached out to wipe away the tears on her face, and said with a tearful smile, "Xiu'er, you are my only daughter and my only support. As long as you can understand me, no matter how hard it is, I will go on." Dong Xiu'er cried so hard that she couldn't say a word. She just held Nanny Dong and cried. "Mother." Then. What about this shop? Princess Chen, what does Princess Chen mean? After crying for a while, Dong Xiu'er finally remembered why she came here, so she asked in a low voice. This shop originally belonged to Princess Chen. What did she mean by making such a scene now? Princess Chen originally wanted me to sell the shop to her above board. On the one hand, she wanted to support me above board. On the other hand, she wanted Wei Dehai to give up. Without this shop, Wei Dehai would never marry me. Now she came here with great fanfare just for this shop. Nanny Dong also wiped away her tears and told Dong Xiu, in a low voice, "You don't have to worry about this. Do what you should do. If Wei Dehai comes to pester you again, you can say that you can't make the decision. Say that Princess Chen is powerful and this shop must be sold to Princess Chen. In that way, he won't pester you again." Dong Xiu nodded repeatedly and her eyes lit up. She didn't want to acknowledge such a biological father, and she didn't want Wei Dehai to mess up her mother's business. This would benefit her mother a lot. On the one hand, she would have a strong owner, and on the other hand, Wei Dehai would give up. Although she had hoped to be an official in the Wei mansion, the most important thing was her mother. She had been lonely with Nanny Dong for half of her life, so how could she not understand Nanny Dong's pain? Not necessarily. Just be careful. Anyway, you don't know anything. I'm relieved that you're fine. Princess Chen will take care of the shop. You don't have to worry about me, Nanny Dong said. Princess Chen meant that Wei Dehai would not give up. Although Nanny Dong didn't believe it, she was a little skeptical. Princess Chen had always been smart and had never made a mistake. But how could Wei Dehai dare to offend Princess Chen? The sound of the mother and daughter crying in each other's arms could be heard outside. Many female customers secretly sighed and felt that the shopkeeper was really a pitiful person. Her ex-husband was such a scumbag, and he was also an official. The shop might really not be safe. After Xiao Wanru returned to the mansion, she entered the palace from the side door to see the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager specially granted her the right to enter the palace to visit her at any time. On the way, when she passed by a courtyard, she saw Di Zhaoyi again. She looked at her from a distance with a very kind smile on her face. Xiao Wanru also smiled at her and then continued to move forward. After the two of them passed each other, they still moved forward separately, as if it was just a simple turning back and passing each other. In the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace, Nanny Wei was chatting and laughing with the Empress Dowager. There was no one else in the hall, so the master and the servant were quite at ease, as if they were an extremely simple pair of master and servant. Hearing that Xiao Wanru had come, the Empress Dowager hurriedly asked someone to summon her. After a while, Xiao Wanru came in and bowed to the Empress Dowager first. The Empress Dowager waved her hand with a smile and motioned for her to sit down. She looked Xiao Wanru up and down and felt that although she looked a little haggard, she was not very serious. "Have you recovered? How is your health?" "Thank you for your concern, Imperial Grandmother. I'm fine now. I just caught a cold occasionally before. It's not a serious illness." "Thank you for your concern, Imperial Grandmother," Xiao Wanru said with a soft smile. "Chen is not around. You are the only master in your mansion, and you are still young. Be careful," the Empress Dowager warned. She was indeed a little worried. Xiao Wanru was really a little young. She originally wanted to wait a few more years, but Chu Luchen wanted to marry her, so the Empress Dowager could only give in to him. She even deliberately mentioned his marriage before his two brothers because of his health. "Imperial Grandmother, I will be careful." Xiao Wanru nodded softly. "Your Highness, the Empress Dowager has been thinking about your health these days. If it weren't for me, she would definitely come to see you," Nanny Wei answered with a smile. Chapter 1065. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Xiao Wanru blinked with a smile, and her red lips curved into a lovely smile. "Imperial Grandmother, you should be careful. It's easy to get sick at this time. My granddaughter-in-law was in excellent health, but she has fallen ill these days. Imperial Grandmother, you should be more careful." Her complexion had always been good and there was a touch of pink on her snow-white face. Right now, She was a bit haggard, but she still had a healthy complexion. This kind of complexion made the Empress Dowager feel very comfortable. How could an old person not like a younger generation with a rosy complexion and healthy complexion? Chu Liuchen, the Empress Dowager, had always been worried about her health. Now she married Xiao Wanru. If the princess was also sick and weak, who would be in charge of the whole mansion? On this point, the Empress Dowager was very satisfied with Xiao Wanru. Imperial grandmother, I went to the street just now and took a fancy to a shop. I'm going to sell it. In the future, if you like anything in the shop, I can ask someone to send it to you, Xiao Wanru said proudly, showing her white teeth with a smile. Shop? What shop? Seeing her so happy, Empress Dowager showed some interest. It's a tailor-made clothing store for women. The clothes and accessories inside are all very good. After my granddaughter-in-law buys this store, Imperial grandmother can choose what she wants. Xiao Wanru said with a smile. That's good. My clothes will depend on you in the future. Empress Dowager was coaxed and laughed. Okay, Imperial grandmother, I'll leave the clothes and materials to my granddaughter-in-law in the future. Xiao Wanru said with a smile. She was beautiful, and her smile made her look even more charming and beautiful. Why does the shop belong to Princess Yu? Could it be that you can't run it anymore? Nanny Wei asked curiously. It's not that the business can't continue. It's just that something happened. The shopkeeper had no choice but to give this shop to me. Otherwise, I'm afraid that even the shop will be taken over by others, Xiao Wanru said. Who's so overbearing? He's just doing business, yet he's causing so much trouble. The Empress Dowager's face darkened. Xiao Wanru's words meant that this shop had been forced into a corner. I heard that she abandoned the shopkeeper's ex-husband or something. Now, she's plotting with her current wife to steal the shopkeeper's money. The female shopkeeper doesn't have any background in the capital. If she doesn't sell her out, she might lose her life. The smile on Xiao Wanru's face faded, and she frowned slightly, feeling indignant for Nanny Dong. What on earth is going on? Tell me. When the Empress Dowager heard that it was not a simple sentence, she asked with her eyes wide open. Xiao Wanru had told the Empress Dowager about the grievances between Madame Dong and Wei Dahai in detail. The Empress Dowager wrung her hands repeatedly and said, "What's the use of such a man? I think so too, so I might as well be the boss of Madame Dong, lest she, a lonely woman, will lose her money and her life in the end," Xiao Wanru said. Indeed, we should help her. What kind of official is he? Ask someone to check if he has other things. Such a person is definitely not a good official, the Empress Dowager said angrily. Xiao Wanru didn't mention Wei Dahai's name when she said it just now, but only mentioned that he was an official. Imperial grandmother, you're right. After I finish the matter, I'll ask him which official of the imperial court would do such a thing. Xiao Wanru nodded repeatedly. Nanny Wei had been standing beside the Empress Dowager. At this time, the smile on her face was a little stiff. She glanced at Xiao Wanru carefully, slowly lowered her head, took a few steps back, and stood respectfully behind the Empress Dowager, looking straight ahead. Such an official appointed by the imperial court is indeed a good-for-nothing. He was actually an imperial examiner in the past. Now, the imperial examiners are testing on literary skills. His character is really bad. There are some people with good character who have never been successful. The Empress Dowager shook her head. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that there was a hidden meaning in the Empress Dowager's words. Her long eyelashes fluttered quickly twice. She raised her watery eyes and followed the Empress Dowager's words and said, "Imperial grandmother, you're right. However, the imperial court will look at literary talents first when selecting officials. Those who are lacking in character will inevitably be found out slowly. But if they are not good at literary talents, it will not be easy for them to stand out." The Empress Dowager nodded in agreement and then asked casually, "You were originally from Jiangzhou, right? Have you heard of Tanhua in the previous world?" Xiao Wanru shook her head and looked at the Empress Dowager in confusion. Imperial Grandmother, during the imperial examination in the previous world, I went to the Yuhui nunnery and didn't see him. I only heard that the top scorer was the third young master of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion next door to our mansion. Marquis Xing's mansion and the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion were neighbors. Even if the masters did not spread the news between the two families, the servants would spread it. Xiao Wanru had heard more than once from the elderly nannies in old Madame's courtyard that they had seen Wen Shiqi when he was a child. They all said that this top scorer had been smart and intelligent since he was a child. At first glance, one could tell that he was extraordinary. The third young master of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion is indeed good. He has a good character and is good in all aspects. He is worth considering. In addition to Bang Yan, who is married, the third young master of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion and Tanhua are not married. I heard that they are also from Jiangzhou. The Empress Dowager turned to Nanny Wei and reached out to press her head. What was his surname before? Empress Dowager, his surname is Qi. It is said that he grew up with Princess Chen and the two families are close. Nanny Wei reminded with a smile. Yes, yes, yes. Look at my memory. It is said that his surname is Qi. It is said that his character and talent are not worse than that of the third young master one. He is also a sentimental person. The Empress Dowager nodded repeatedly. Tell me what this person is like. It is said that he came from outside before, so it is not accurate. His surname is Qi. He became Tanhua again. Is his name Qi Tianyu? Xiao Wanru asked calmly. Qi Tianyu. Yes, yes, it is this person. The Empress Dowager said repeatedly and looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile. How about this person? Well, Xiao Wanru said with embarrassment on her face. She lowered her head and twisted the handkerchief in her hand a few times. She was a little uneasy and helpless. Imperial Grandmother, who told you that I know this person? Is there anything wrong? The Empress Dowager asked kindly. Xiao Wanru's eyes turned red. Imperial Grandmother, I don't know what others said about it. Our prince knew about it. He happened to be in Jiangzhou at that time. Chu Luqian also knew about it. The Empress Dowager was surprised. Looking at Xiao Wanru's expression, there was obviously something wrong, and it was not a small thing. She did not mention Qi Tianyu, which seemed to be avoiding suspicion. Then I will ask Chen about it. The Empress Dowager comforted her. It's nothing. I just thought of such a person. I heard that he is also one of the few talents in the capital city, so I asked him about it. He said that he came from Jiangzhou like you and seemed to know him. Imperial Grandmother, I know him, but this person. I really can't tell him. It's better for our prince to tell him about it. Xiao Wanru said aggrievedly with red eyes. No matter how Qi Tianyu appeared in front of the Empress Dowager, it was not convenient for her to mention him. Chu Luqian was the most suitable person to tell her about it. The Empress Dowager wrote to him again. Her face looked sad, but her brain was spinning rapidly. She was thinking about who had deliberately exposed Qi Tianyu and what was the purpose of implicating her. Although the accident at that time was not caused by her, it was a little against women's precepts and women's ethics. As a woman, she seemed a little rude. She had not figured out the Empress Dowager's temper yet. She did not know if she would be angry when she heard such a thing. Okay, I'll ask Chen her then. The Empress Dowager said. Xiao Wanru sniffed, turned her head sideways, wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, and then turned her head again with a gentle smile on her face. Her smile was clear and shallow, which made people feel particularly lovely. However, the haggard look in her eyes was obvious, which made people feel sorry for her. If you are tired, go back and have a rest first. The Empress Dowager said gently. I'm not tired. It's going to be Imperial Grandmother's birthday soon. What kind of gift does Imperial Grandmother like? This is the first time I give Imperial Grandmother a gift, and I'm afraid that Imperial Grandmother won't like the gift. Xiao Wanru had pushed away the sadness on her face and looked at the Empress Dowager eagerly, as if she wanted to please the Empress Dowager wholeheartedly. She had an outstanding appearance. At this time, her big eyes were full of the Empress Dowager, and her eyes were clear. In addition, she was young and looked a little cute, just like the little princesses in the palace. There was no impurity in her eyes, which made people feel sorry for her. In the past, Chen would give me some gifts that I like. Now you don't have to worry. Chen must have prepared them. The Empress Dowager said with a smile in a very good mood. It's the first time for me to celebrate Imperial Grandmother's birthday, so I should do my best. Xiao Wanru said. Her words made the Empress Dowager laugh again. Your Highness, Princess Chen is filial to you. In the future, you can not only enjoy the happiness of a grandson, but also enjoy the happiness of a granddaughter-in-law. Nanny Wei said jokingly. The Empress Dowager laughed more and more happily. In fact, I don't have any special hobbies. I'll be happy with whatever you give me. Imperial Grandmother, have you already made arrangements here? Xiao Wanru looked around and asked curiously. When she came in just now, the palace maids and eunuchs outside were carrying some things, mainly in the front hall. Princess Chen, the emperor wants to hold the banquet in the front hall today. The banquet can also be arranged there. Now it's almost ready. Basically, it was arranged recently. When Princess Chen came before, it had just started. Nanny Wei said with a smile. Imperial Grandmother, I want to broaden my horizons. Can I? Xiao Wanru's eyes lit up, and she raised her eyes happily and said. It was not difficult. The Empress Dowager waved her hand with a smile and asked Nanny Wei to take Xiao Wanru there. Chapter 1066. The so-called front hall was actually the gate of the Palace of Benevolent Peace. After going up the high steps from the gate, they arrived at the main hall. The main hall was very spacious and beautifully decorated. The banquet tables were also distributed in an extremely orderly manner. The palace maids and eunuchs came and went in an orderly manner. Seeing Nanny Wei coming with Xiao Wanru, they bowed respectfully and didn't leave until they left. Xiao Wanru walked in, looked at the neat rows of tables, and asked, Isn't the banquet just for women? Men and women are all here. The Empress Dowager's birthday is celebrated by the whole world. His Majesty's intention is that we don't have to celebrate separately. We can all celebrate here. Not only the concubines in the palace, but the emperor and the princes will also come. In addition, some princes and important ministers will also come. Many women will come. Nanny Wei introduced with a smile. Xiao Wanru nodded. As she had heard, it was a huge banquet, and what happened later would have the greatest impact. She walked forward and saw that there were also rows of tables on the steps in front of the main hall. It should be the place where the princes and princesses sat. As for the top, there was only one table, which was not big, but the 3 chairs around it were all made of gold inlaid wood, which was huge and wide, especially the one in the middle, which had the dragon pattern on its shoulder, which was even more noble. Nanny Wei, is this the emperor's dragon throne? Xiao Wanru gasped. It was the first time for her to see the emperor's dragon throne. She heard that even in the palace, there were not many specially made dragon throne by the emperor. It is indeed the emperor's dragon throne. The Empress Dowager specially made it for the emperor. On both sides are the seats for the Empress Dowager and the empress. Nanny Wei nodded. Hearing her words, Xiao Wanru looked at the chairs on both sides and found that these 2 chairs were also different from other chairs. Although they were a little smaller and could not be compared with the dragon throne in the middle, there were also phoenix patterns on the shoulders, which were exquisite and gorgeous. It was indeed different from the atmosphere of the royal family. Nanny Wei, what kind of gift does the Empress Dowager like best? Is there any taboo? It is the first time for me to attend the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet. I'm afraid that I will offend the Empress Dowager's taboo. After exclaiming, Xiao Wanru got down to business. This was an important reason why she specially asked Nanny Wei to lead the way. When Xiao Wanru proposed to see the layout of the front hall, Nanny Wei had vaguely guessed it. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, she immediately said with a smile, "Princess Chen, you are too polite. Empress Dowager is actually a very good master and there is nothing special to avoid in daily life. Princess Chen, you only need to prepare a birthday gift according to your wishes." Xiao Wanru looked at Nanny Wei with a smile and said, "There is no taboo. Do you have a favorite?" "Well, actually, I don't like it very much. I just like it to be unique and different from other things. Besides, Empress Dowager likes calligraphy and painting." Nanny Wei reminded implicitly. "Do you like unique calligraphy and paintings?" Xiao Wanru's eyes lit up and her long eyelashes flickered. She was a little tempted. Nanny Wei smiled and said nothing, but her meaning was very clear. "Thank you, Nanny Wei." Xiao Wanru bowed sideways and said gratefully, "Princess Chen, you are too polite. How can I accept your courtesy?" Nanny Wei hurriedly moved aside to let Xiao Wanru bow to her. Xiao Wanru straightened her back and asked again, "Nanny Wei, do you want to send the gift first or wait until Empress Dowager's birthday?" "Well, they are basically sent on the spot on the official birthday," Nanny Wei said. In fact, there were some who sent gifts first, but not many. Moreover, many who sent gifts first would still send a congratulatory gift when the time came. There were benefits for sending gifts first, and there were benefits for sending gifts on the spot. However, those who sent gifts first usually had a special relationship with Empress Dowager. However, there was no need to say this to Princess Chen in front of her. "Thank you, Nanny Wei." Xiao Wanru bowed politely again, and Nanny Wei also avoided with a smile. The two of them walked for a while and chatted for a while before returning to the Empress Dowager's place. The Empress Dowager was tired and went to rest. She also told Xiao Wanru to help herself when she came over. If she was tired, she could go back. If she was not tired, she could stroll in the garden and enjoy the scenery. There was no need to rush back. She was the only master in Prince Chen's mansion, and it was too quiet. Xiao Wanru thanked the Empress Dowager for her kindness and left the Palace of Benevolent Peace. Nanny Wei walked her to the gate and watched her leave. She stopped smiling and frowned tightly. Did Princess Chen say something about her nephew? Although it was a little different from what her nephew said, the more she listened to it, the more she felt that it was true. Could it be that this matter really had something to do with Princess Chen? If it was true, she had to persuade her nephew not to clash with Princess Chen. Princess Chen might be nothing, but Prince Chen was the Empress Dowager's beloved grandson. Xiao Wanru casually returned to the back door of Prince Chen's mansion with Yujie. Chu Luchen was not in the mansion, so it was inconvenient for her to stay in the palace. Although there were no outsiders in the palace, the possibility of bumping into several princes was still very high. Without Chu Luchen, she should be more careful. On the way back, she didn't meet Di Jiaoyi, but unexpectedly met Madame O, the female painter. The two of them almost bumped into each other at the corner. Madame O took 2 steps back, and the paintings in her hands fell to the ground. Seeing Xiao Wanru opposite her, she was stunned for a moment and then hurriedly saluted, "Greetings, Princess Chen." The former beauty had already become the princess of Prince Chen's mansion. "Madame O, you are too polite." Xiao Wanru smiled softly and asked Yujie to help Madame O pick up the paintings one by one. "Madame O, where are you going to send so many paintings?" Xiao Wanru looked curiously at the painting on a scattered scroll and asked curiously. It was a painting of a mother and a son playing. The young child was round and cute, and the young madam looked dignified and gentle. While embroidering the child's clothes, she smiled and said nothing. On the birthday of the Empress Dowager, she asked me to draw more paintings of a mother and a son getting along well. I showed them to the supervisor of the Ministry of Internal Affairs just now, but he was not satisfied with them. Madame O took the paintings handed over by Yujie and said helplessly, "Is it the Emperor's order?" Xiao Wanru's eyes flickered. The Emperor asked the Ministry of Internal Affairs to buy them. I heard that they would choose the best ones to present to the Empress Dowager, but now they are all rejected, saying that the paintings are not good enough. I heard that they have never been used before. Madame O sighed in distress and said. At this time, it was best to choose the authentic works that were out of print. How could they let the painters draw in this way? Although their paintings were good, they couldn't be compared with those famous painters. Just this year? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows and asked. Yes, just this year. I was going to go out of the palace, but now I stay here to draw these kinds of paintings, Madame O said. It had been a while since the end of the consort selection. She should have left the palace long ago, but now she was delayed by this matter. Do the others also draw these kinds of paintings? Xiao Wanru looked at Madame O with her watery eyes and asked with a smile. They are also of this kind. They want to show the harmonious relationship between a mother and a son, and they should be young. Just now, I said that there are too few children to draw. There should be 3, Madame O said. The 3 of them included the late emperor. The matters of the late emperor were blurred in the past, blurring his existence, as if he was just an ordinary king. Some of the matters of the late emperor and the relationship between the king and his subjects also slowly faded from the public sight. This blurring was very slow, but it was very effective. Now basically, if it was not clearly related to the late emperor, few people would mention the late emperor. At this time, it was really strange that the Empress Dowager deliberately asked the painters to draw 3 children. Under the name of Empress Dowager, her biological sons were the late emperor and the current emperor. Prince Qing happened to have 3 children, 3 princes. After saying goodbye to Madame O, Xiao Wanru had been thinking about this problem. She always felt that it was too strange and unreasonable. If the emperor wanted to send a painting to the Empress Dowager's birthday, it should at least be an authentic one, instead of asking a painter to draw a painting casually. Even if Madame O and other painters were excellent, it was still not appropriate. They were not masters of the present age, nor were they of noble status. Why should they be sent to the Empress Dowager, and it was the emperor's order? In addition, the matter about the late emperor was too strange. These things slowly flowed in her mind, as if to express something, but she couldn't grasp the point at the moment. After returning to Prince Chen's mansion and sitting down, she thought about it carefully, and her expression became more and more strange. Could it be that it was not the emperor's order? If it was not the emperor's order, whose order was it? Originally, she entered the palace today to report to the Empress Dowager first. On the surface, Wei Dahai seemed to be a heartless man who coveted his ex-wife's money. However, it involved Mo Chiui, who behaved strangely and mysteriously, and then Chu Qing, which made Xiao Wanru vigilant. That was why she entered the palace to meet the Empress Dowager today. Nanny Wei, who was standing behind the Empress Dowager, behaved a little strange. Wei Dahai's surname was Wei, and so was Nanny Wei's. Was there any connection between them? When she mentioned Wei Dahai just now, although she didn't mention his name, Nanny Wei's behavior seemed to be a little embarrassed, as if she knew something. This abnormality disappeared quickly. When Nanny Wei led her to the front hall, Nanny Wei had already returned to normal. No matter how carefully she checked, she didn't find anything. Was it because Nanny Wei was too shrewd, or did she really misunderstand? In addition, the matter about Madame O was also strange. The Department of Internal Affairs? It seemed that she had to ask her maternal grandma who was in charge of the Department of Internal Affairs. This time, the Empress Dowager's birthday was in charge of the Department of Internal Affairs. When the accident happened in the last life, no one in charge of the Department of Internal Affairs was convicted. It seemed that no one made mistakes, but in the end, they forced Prince Zhou and the Empress to rebel. An old maid walked into the yard and reported respectfully in the corridor, "Your Highness, a madam wants to see you. She said that she has something to do with Marquis Xing. You have met her before." Chapter 1067. Who? Xiao Wanru didn't understand, waved her hand and asked again. Yu Jia lifted the curtain and went out. The old maid lowered her head and didn't dare to look at Xiao Wanru behind the curtain and said in a low voice, "It's said that she is an old maid who has a relationship with Marquis Xing." In fact, the old maid didn't want to report it. At first glance, she could tell that this madam didn't have a powerful background. Otherwise, she would report it as a madam instead of an old maid. There were many old maids, including those whom she met when she was young and had no relationship with. However, since it was said that she was an old maid from Marquis Xing's mansion, the old maid didn't dare to offend her and could only come in to report it. "Your Highness, there are no old maids in Marquis Xing's mansion. When I was in Marquis Xing's mansion before, I didn't see any madam come to visit you." Yu Jie turned back, lowered the curtain, and went inside to report. In fact, she had only been in Marquis Xing's mansion for a few days. Not to mention madam, she didn't even see many misses from other mansions. She only saw a few in the mansion who were scheming against each other. Yu Jie really couldn't think of any madam who was an old maid of her master in Marquis Xing's mansion. "Your Highness, is it possible that she deliberately blackmailed me?" Chu Lu suddenly thought of something and asked. She couldn't think of any madam who was familiar with her princess. Those who could be called old maids must be acquaintances. The princess didn't even meet outsiders in Marquis Xing's mansion, so how could there be a madam? It was impossible to say that it was Madame Jiang, the madam of Marquis Xing. Madame Jiang couldn't come out to meet others at the moment. It was even more impossible for old madam to come. First grandma wouldn't report a familiar madam. As for other people, the two maids couldn't think of any. Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and suddenly smiled. "There is indeed one." "Which one?" "Your Highness, we have been following you. Why don't we know about it?" Chu Lu and Yu Jie looked at each other. "That day, when I met Marquis Xing outside." Xiao Wanru reminded them with a deep look in her eyes. "No way. Why did such a woman come to see you?" Chu Lu said in disbelief. She was Marquis Xing's mistress, who was obviously not a good person. Later, they heard the news and found it was true. Not only was she his mistress, but she had been raising him for more than 10 years. She even had a daughter now. Who in a noble family would look up to such a mistress? "Princess, Marquis Xing has gone too far. He actually let this woman come to our mansion. Does he want you to recognize her first and then propose to let her marry into our mansion?" Yu Jie was so angry that her face turned pale. "It's impossible. Old madam has to give the order to enter Marquis Xing's mansion." Chu Lu shook her head and denied. Marquis Xing had his own elders, and he was also the elder of the princess. How could he let a junior help his mistress to enter the mansion? Why is it impossible? Old madam is not in charge of affairs now. It is first grandma who is in charge of affairs in the mansion, and first grandma is her daughter-in-law. No matter how thick-skinned Marquis Xing is, he will be too embarrassed to ask his daughter-in-law to propose such a thing. Now princess is the most distinguished person in Marquis Xing's mansion. As long as princess shows up, it will not be a problem for Marquis Xing's concubine. Not only will Marquis Xing's concubine be recognized, but he will also have a daughter. Yu Jie said with a sneer. Xiao Wanru fell silent for a moment. This woman came in a very strange way. She had only met her once. As an ordinary mistress, she was eager to hide when she saw people in the mansion. However, she actually had the courage to come to her mansion just because she was a madam of an old acquaintance. She was sure that she would meet her and was willing to meet her. "Send her away and tell her that I don't know her," Xiao Wanru said. No matter where this woman came from, she didn't want to pay attention to her. She just wanted to see what they would do next. "Princess, I'll go and have a look." Yu Jie took the initiative to say softly. She wanted to see that shameless woman. Xiao Wanru nodded. Yu Jie lifted the curtain and went out of the mansion with the old maid who came to report the news. When she arrived at the gate, she saw a lonely carriage in front of the gate. In front of the small carriage stood a 13 or 14-year-old servant girl. She combed her hair into a bun and looked quite delicate. When she saw Yu Jie coming, she hurriedly bowed to her. "Who is your madam? Our princess doesn't know any, madam. Yujie raised her head and looked at the carriage with a rather arrogant look. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, and there was a 12 or 13-year-old servant girl in it. The girl called Young appeared behind the lifted curtain. When she saw Yujie, she smiled before saying anything. She got out of the carriage with the help of the little servant girl, turned sideways, and bowed to Yujie. Miss, we met last time. At that time, Princess Chen and Marquis Xing were both there. Do you still remember me? She was dressed in a light-colored long dress, which made her look very elegant, and her delicate appearance became more outstanding. She was a woman who was very good at dressing up. That day, Marquis Xing was with Xiao Jing, so Yujie didn't dare to look at her too much. At this time, she looked her up and down carefully. Who are you? Our princess doesn't know you. After looking at her, Yujie still looked serious and said unhappily, you'd better go back. If you want to see Marquis Xing, go to Marquis Xing's mansion. Miss Yujie, I'm Anyang, who was brought here by the Marquis last time. Anyang said softly with tears in her eyes, looking extremely pitiful. Didn't the princess greet me in the private room before? So what do you want to do? Yujie was shocked. Anyang even knew her name. As expected, she came prepared. She immediately looked serious. I don't want to do anything. I just want to see Princess Chen. Anyang wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and said with great grievance, after meeting Princess Chen before, I thought of something. It should be related to Princess Chen, so I specially came here this time. Something about our princess? Yujie looked at Anyang up and down again and said unhappily, what does our princess want you to come here for? With Xiao Wanru's identity, how could she have anything to do with such a woman? It's true. It's about the princess's father. Miss Yujie, please go in and report it. Anyang said softly and bowed sideways again, looking very respectful to Yujie. The princess's father was the former heir of Duke Xing. Yujie couldn't decide such a thing for the time being. The princess had been looking for the truth of that year, and several of her confidants knew it. However, it was too difficult to find out what happened in that year, and the former heir of Duke Xing died in a place like the border. Now there was a clue. However, Yujie was dubious that the clue appeared in the hands of this woman. Miss Yujie, it's really important. When I met Princess Chen before, I didn't think of it. Later, I remembered such an important thing. Miss Yujie. Seeing Yujie's hesitation, Anyang knew that there was a chance, so she said in an even louder voice. She looked very sincere. There's no need. Our princess said that she knows everything about the princess's father and mother. There's no need for this madam to tell you anything. If this madam really thinks that there's something wrong, you can go out and turn left to the Ministry of Justice. You can go to the hall of the Ministry of Justice to make it clear. Chu Lu came out of the door of Prince Chen's mansion. She left later than Yujie. It was Xiao Wanru who specially asked her to come here. What she said now was also Xiao Wanru's special instruction. I really have something to report to the princess. Seeing Chu Lu come out expressionlessly, Anyang knew that it was not good, so she hurriedly said. Madam, our princess really doesn't know you, and she doesn't want to know about the matter about the former heir of Duke Xing that you deliberately made up. If you continue to pester her, don't blame the guards in our mansion for not recognizing you. They will directly arrest you, throw you into prison, and charge you with disturbing the prince's mansion. After receiving Xiao Wanru's order, Chu Li's attitude was very tough. A few guards came out of the door and walked over with unkind eyes. Although the long swords hanging at their waists were still sheathed, they gave off a murderous look. These guards at the door were specially sent by the emperor. When Chu Lu went out just now, she told them that someone deliberately came to make trouble, so she asked the chief of the guards to send a few guards out. Anyang's face turned pale in panic. Seeing Chu Li's cold eyes and the guards with a bit of murderous look, she didn't dare to say anything and could only help the servant girl get into the carriage. The carriage made a turn and went out obediently. Chu Lu, did the princess ask you to come here? Yujia looked at the carriage, which almost seemed to have escaped, and then at the guards who walked back again and asked in a low voice. Let's go back first. Chu Lu nodded. The two of them entered the prince's mansion together and went to the backyard. Your Highness, she said that she knew something about your father. She said that she didn't remember it when she saw you at that time, but now she suddenly remembered it, so she made a special trip here. As soon as Yujia entered the door, she reported to Xiao Wanru. Chu Lu went there late just now, so she didn't hear this. At this time, she was stunned for a moment. It turned out to be such an important thing, so she looked at Xiao Wanru subconsciously. With the princess's character, she would definitely investigate this kind of thing. It turns out to be such a reason. Xiao Wanru smiled coldly. Just now, she had guessed that this woman must have a very justifiable reason for her to have to see her. Now it seemed that it was true. Could it be true, Your Highness? Yujie said worriedly. The matter between Infanta Qinghua and the former heir of Duke Xing's mansion was what the princess was most concerned about. If it was true, she couldn't miss it. Do you think it's true? Xiao Wanru raised her cold eyes and asked. I don't know. I think it may be true, but it may also be false. Yujie hesitated. She really couldn't tell whether it was true or not. Why do you say so? Xiao Wanru asked with some interest. This woman is Marquis Xing's mistress. According to her identity, it seems that she may know something. But even if she knows something, it is impossible for her to suddenly come to see you, who she has only met once, unless something unexpected has happened to her. So I think it may be true, but it may also be false. It's hard to say. Yujie thought for a while and said bluntly. End of this chapter. Chapter 1068. Whether it's true or not, someone can't sit still anymore. Let's wait. Xiao Wanru said indifferently. This girl called Yi Yang was really an accident that she had not expected. What was Xiao Jing up to? What did he want to do? Your Highness, this woman is very bold. When I deliberately drove her away, she didn't panic. Instead, she said something that made me hesitate. She doesn't look like an ordinary mistress, Yujie said uneasily. She didn't look like a concubine. Although her dress looked a little pompous and her behavior was not like that of a good family, she was very courageous. In front of her, the personal palace made of Prince Chen, she could not be anxious and impatient. Such behavior was not simple. She can hide under the nose of the Jiang family for so long and stand up at this time. Not only does she judge the situation, but she also grasps the timing very well. As for what she said, if it's true, Xiao Jing has also been defeated by her. If it's not true, she must have colluded with him. Xiao Wanru said with coldness in her eyes. She was more inclined to the second possibility. Xiao Jing hid very well and was cruel and merciless. If something really happened to Yi Yang, she wouldn't have survived until now and given birth to a daughter for him. There seemed to be something fishy about the daughter. If she grasped it correctly at this time, Aunt, please help me. This is true. I have no choice but to do this. Wei Dahai knelt in front of Nanny Wei and put his hands on her knees. The tall man cried like a child in front of Nanny Wei and said with grievance, Aunt, I really have no choice. They were in a simple courtyard. Although it was not big, it was not cheap because it was located in the center. This was Nanny Wei's courtyard outside the palace, which was given by the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager intended to send Nanny Wei out of the palace for a good rest when the time was right, so this courtyard had been prepared early. Nanny Wei was old. Although she had to serve the Empress Dowager a lot in the Imperial Palace, there were times when the Empress Dowager let her out of the Imperial Palace. The Empress Dowager was very kind to her and lived in the courtyard outside the Imperial Palace for 10 days a month. Since she recognized Wei Dahai would come to see her from time to time when she went out of the palace. Since they recognized each other, Wei Dahai had been very close to her and always said that he would take care of Nanny Wei when she went out of the palace. Nanny Wei really cared about her nephew. But at this moment, she couldn't agree. She reached out to hold Wei Dahai's hand and sighed, "Dahai, don't even think about this shop. Princess Chen has taken a fancy to it, and even the Empress Dowager knows about it. She even said that you are an ungrateful person and said that she will investigate who has such a bad character." She wanted to tell the Empress Dowager early that Nanny Wei recognized her nephew, but Wei Dahai stopped her and said that there was no need to rush to find out the truth. Nanny Wei was still serving the Empress Dowager. If he was promoted in the previous dynasty, people would inevitably mistakenly think that he followed Nanny Wei's path. This was not good for Nanny Wei or for him. He said sternly that it was his own business whether he was promoted or not, and it had nothing to do with Nanny Wei. He didn't want to use Nanny Wei's power. He just wanted to recognize this aunt and said that his father ordered him to do so. When he found Nanny Wei, he would treat her like his biological parents and take care of her for the rest of her life. These words moved Nanny Wei and she repeatedly said yes. She felt that this nephew had an excellent character and was filial. In front of the Empress Dowager, Nanny Wei only mentioned a little that she recognized her nephew, but she didn't mention anything else. Nanny Wei didn't expect that this nephew, who was willing to keep a low profile, offended Princess Chen this time. Nanny Wei was really helpless. Nanny Wei had heard from Wei Dahai about the shop of butterfly clothing shop before. He said that the shopkeeper used to have a relationship with him and gave birth to a daughter for him. He wanted to take the shopkeeper back and give the shop to his daughter, and he would not charge a penny. When Wei Dahai said these words, it was reasonable. Nanny Wei nodded repeatedly and told him that he couldn't look down on others just because they gave birth to a daughter. If he took her into the mansion, he should also treat her well. As for his niece-in-law, he also needed to explain it clearly. His niece-in-law had always been a reasonable person and was very filial in front of Nanny Wei. Wei Dahai said that things were almost done, and he just needed to wait a little longer. He didn't expect that Princess Chen would say such words today. Nanny Wei had a headache. Although the Empress Dowager thought highly of her, Princess Chen was different from others. She was Prince Chen's legal wife. Everyone could see the Empress Dowager's love for Prince Chen. Even the Empress in the palace didn't dare to offend Prince Chen easily, not to mention that she was just a servant who served others. Gugu, Mingyang and I love each other. At that time, she had no choice but to leave me. If she is forced to leave me again this time, how can I face her? She trusts me so much and wholeheartedly waits for me to marry into the Wei Fu. Our Fu has long prepared a courtyard and everything is ready. We even revealed this matter to some people, but now Chen Wangfei has interfered. Gugu, this. What should we do? Wei Dahai cried like a child with a sad face. A man's knees were made of gold. How could he kneel just because he wanted to? As for crying, every time Wei Dahai came over, he was always smiling. He had never cried in front of her. Aunt, I beg you this time. For Madam Ming and Xiao, I beg you this time. Please help me. Looking at Nanny Wei's face, Wei Dahai knew that he had a chance and cried even more sadly. He begged Nanny Wei for his wife and daughter, which made Nanny Wei increasingly feel that he was a man of affection. Hearing him being so sad, her eyes couldn't help turning red. This Ming Yang and her nephew could be said to be reconciled. She had not married for so many years and brought up a daughter with her, all for the sake of her nephew. Obviously, she was also affectionate and righteous. Such two people who were so in love with each other were forced by Princess Chen to separate. Such a grown man was forced to cry in front of her like this. She inexplicably felt a little annoyed with Xiao Wanru in her heart. Princess Chen seemed to be a good person. Why did she do such a thing and deliberately made a scene in front of the Empress Dowager? Was it because of her? She pulled Wei Dahai up hard and sighed helplessly. Don't cry. Let's think of a way. Thank you, Aunt. Thank you, Aunt. Wei Dahai was overjoyed. He forced himself to kneel down and kowtowed to Nanny Wei 3 times. The kowtows on the ground made a thudding sound. He kowtowed 3 times. Get up quickly. Aren't you afraid of a headache? Nanny Wei pulled him hard. Wei Dahai didn't refuse this time. He stood up with Nanny Wei's hand, took the handkerchief handed by Nanny Wei, wiped his eyes casually, and looked at Nanny Wei eagerly. Nanny Wei sighed again, pointed to the chair, and said, sit down and talk. Thank you, Aunt. Wei Dahai sat down and looked at Nanny Wei expectantly with his bright eyes. He was not small and not young, but his expression made Nanny Wei's heart soften for no reason. He was her only relative, her nephew, and the only child of her family. Even for this, she couldn't bear to separate them. It was really not easy for them to stay together for so many years. Today, Princess Chen said to the Empress Dowager that you are interested in other people's shops, so you propose to marry the shopkeeper. She said that you are greedy, fickle, and ungrateful. Tell me, is it true? Are you interested in other people's shops, or do you two really love each other? Nanny Wei asked with a serious face. Since she wanted to intervene, she must find out the truth, so that she could stand firm. Even if she complained to the Empress Dowager, she wouldn't feel guilty. Auntie, how could you believe such words? It was clearly Princess Chen who had her eyes on that shop and wanted to take it by force. She deliberately ruined the relationship between Yang Ming and Yang Ming. She might even say that Yang Ming was not a virtuous woman. Auntie, Yang Ming is really a good woman. If it wasn't for a freak combination of factors, we wouldn't have been separated for so long. She raised her child alone. Yang Ming's heart aches for her. Wei Dahai couldn't help crying when he said this. Seeing that he felt sorry for Dong Mingyang to the bone, Nanny Wei's expression softened a little, and she said, what a sin. What a sin. Aunt, if you don't believe me, I'll ask Dong Ming's mother to come over in a few days and let her explain this matter to you. Is it Princess Chen who has taken a fancy to her shop or me who has taken a fancy to her shop? Wei Dahai said angrily. He stood up and seemed to go out to find Dong Mingyang to explain what had happened that year. Seeing him like this, how could Nanny Wei not believe him? She reached out to pull his sleeve and let him sit down again. How can I not believe you? You are my nephew. But the matter at hand is a little troublesome. The Empress Dowager also knows about it. Aunt, Princess Chen is really abominable. She also bullies orphans and widows. Madame Ming is such a poor woman. It's very difficult for her to live with a girl. She finally gained a foothold in the capital city, but was forced to this extent by Princess Chen. What if she can't bear the blow and can't think it through? Wei Dahai said anxiously, and a trace of cruelty flashed in his eyes. If Dong Mingyang really didn't know how to appreciate kindness, she couldn't blame him for being cruel. He was determined to get the shop of Butterfly Clothing Shop. What he had thought was a sure thing changed because of the appearance of Princess Chen. Fortunately, he had reported it to Nanny Wei before. So what if Princess Chen was Princess Chen? She was just a woman who married a sick prince. Even if she had the background of Great Elder Princess, how could she compare with the Empress Dowager? Chapter 1069. No, maybe there will be a turn for the better. Nanny Wei shook her head and said, you should also persuade Dong Ming's mother to bear with it. Aunt, I'm afraid that Prince Chen's mansion will push her too hard these days. Aunt, please save Ming's mother. Wei Dahai begged again. Okay. Wait a minute and let me think about it. Nanny Wei had a headache because of his begging and said hurriedly. Her mind was in a mess now and she didn't know how to deal with this matter at the moment. Princess Chen looked young, but she was a person with ideas. In addition, Prince Chen was behind her. This prince had broken the arm of Ruiping Great Elder Princess's grandson before, so Ruiping Great Elder Princess's mansion didn't dare to have any opinions. He didn't even give face to Great Elder Princess. Would he give face to her? Aunt, you are Empress Dowager's personal nanny and entered the palace with Empress Dowager. You have accompanied Empress Dowager for so many years and your relationship with Empress Dowager is incomparable to that of Princess Chen. Empress Dowager values you the most. Empress Dowager has many grandchildren and there will be more granddaughters-in-law in the future. I heard that Princess Chen is not Empress Dowager's favorite person. Wei Dahai saw her hesitation and reminded her. Her words made Nanny Wei feel comfortable. Her relationship with the Empress Dowager was indeed different. They had gone through many hardships in the palace to get to the present stage. The Empress Dowager also thought highly of her. Nanny Wei could also speak in front of the Empress Dowager in the past. "Aunt, you don't need to do anything. You just need to say in front of Empress Dowager that Princess Chen takes advantage of her power to bully others, rob others' shops, and ruin their marriage. Empress Dowager is a sensible person and has always been kind. She will certainly not see Ming's mother fall into such a miserable situation." Wei Dahai added fuel to the fire. "It's not easy for me to say it." Nanny Wei frowned and said. "Aunt, don't worry. I won't ask you to say it. You just need to say a few words on the side. Someone here will say it." Wei Dahai whispered. "You have someone in the palace?" Nanny Wei's face changed greatly. If someone were to find out that he had planted spies in the palace, it would implicate the entire clan. "Auntie, don't worry, it's not an important person. When we first met, I was afraid that Auntie would not have a good time in the palace, so I specially bribed a little palace maid to help me look after you. I was afraid that if something happened to you, I would not know until the end," Wei Dahai explained. Nanny Wei breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Wei Dahai more gently. This nephew of hers was indeed filial. Nanny Wei thought that Nanny Wei was just a little palace maid. There's no need to be like this in the future. I'm doing very well in the palace, and the Empress Dowager is also very good to me. Aunt, even if you say so, I'm still worried. You are so old. After this matter, please ask the Empress Dowager to let you out of the palace. Although I'm not capable, I can still take care of you for the rest of your life." Wei Dahai took the opportunity to express his love. Wei Dahai knew that it was impossible for Nanny Wei to leave the imperial palace right away. Nanny Wei was very healthy. Even if she wanted to leave, the Empress Dowager would keep her. But he had to say something nice. Anyway, it was free. No matter how nice it sounded, it was just a casual talk. It was impossible for him to take it seriously. Seeing that he was thinking for her wholeheartedly, Nanny Wei was very moved and believed what Wei Dahai said more and more. He was really a person who valued friendship. As Princess Chen said, Princess Chen must have lied to deliberately discredit her nephew. She used to think that Princess Chen was a good person, but she didn't expect that she was so scheming. If Wei Dahai wasn't her nephew, Princess Chen would have harmed the whole family this time. "Aunt, I'll let this little palace maid talk to others herself. Just let the Empress Dowager hear it. At that time, help Lady Ming to say a few more words. Aunt, the lives of Lady Ming and Xiao are entrusted to you." Wei Dahai stood up and was about to kneel down and kowtow to Nanny Wei. Nanny Wei grabbed him and said repeatedly, Okay, I know. Don't kneel down. Think about it. Tell me the people who will help. I'll arrange it. We can't really let Princess Chen force them to death. This was a good thing. Even if it was other people's business, she would help them if she knew it, not to mention that he was her nephew. Nanny Wei had made up her mind to help Wei Dahai. She was thinking of Wei's wholeheartedly. Wei Dahai told some details to Nanny Wei and then left. He got on the carriage outside the courtyard. When he sat in the carriage, his kind face immediately darkened, showing a sense of coldness. He didn't expect that Princess Chen would intervene in this matter. He originally wanted to report to the Empress Dowager before Princess Chen did. He didn't expect that after Princess Chen came back from outside, she went directly to the palace to see the Empress Dowager and talked about this matter. The shop of Butterfly Clothing Shop was extremely profitable. He just casually flipped through the account book before and found that this shop made more money than the shops in his hands. He was very short of money now. This shop's profit was so good that he was very jealous. After going back, he even discussed how to use the money. How could he watch such a large sum of money go away? He was determined to get this shop. The carriage took a few turns and returned to the Wei mansion. When the doorman saw that his master had returned, he hurried forward with a lantern and led the way in front of him. Wei Dahai went to the inner courtyard with his hands behind his back. The main courtyard, the largest in the inner courtyard, was brightly lit. His wife, Ouyang, was still sitting under the lamp waiting for him. Seeing him come in, she waved her hand, and the servant girls and old maids on both sides left silently. "How's it going?" Ouyang asked. The thin Ouyang was not good-looking. It could even be said that she was not as good-looking as ordinary people. Under the light, she looked indescribably gloomy. Her cheeks were drooping, her eyes were protruding, and her lips were particularly fat. If it weren't for her good complexion, she couldn't even be compared with an old maid in an ordinary courtyard. "Master, how's it going?" Ouyang sat in the chair and didn't get up. She said with a displeased look, "Why did you go for so long? Is it so difficult?" "It's a little difficult. Princess Chen has already entered the palace and talked to the Empress Dowager about it." Wei Dahai frowned so hard that he could almost catch a fly. What does Princess Chen mean? Isn't she stretching her hand too far? Ouyang snorted coldly and her face was gloomy. She married a sick person. She doesn't know when he will die. What's the point of fishing for money? She can't even keep her life, what's the point of having so much money? Ouyang snorted coldly. Wei Dahai sat down and picked up the teapot on the table to pour himself a cup of tea. He drank about half of it before putting it down. "My aunt said that this matter should be done according to us. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page, it's really troublesome to do what we discussed before." Originally, it was just Dong Mingyang's matter. It was very easy to deal with, but now there's Princess Chen. What were you doing earlier? If you had gotten rid of that woman earlier, nothing would have happened. If you had listened to me, this wouldn't have happened. You just can't bear to let your daughter be wronged. Do you not have your own daughter or something? Why are you so concerned about the daughter of another concubine? Ouyang said coldly and slammed her hand on the table. She had proposed to catch Dong Xiu'er and threatened Dong Mingyang to hand over the shop. As long as it was done properly, no one would care about it. As long as there was no victim, no one would investigate at all. They could just say that Dong Mingyang had resigned. There wouldn't be so much trouble and the matter would become more and more serious. If Dong Xiu'er and Dong Mingyang were sacrificed, nothing would happen. "Xiu'er is my flesh and blood," Wei Dahai said. "Your flesh and blood? I didn't give birth to your flesh and blood. Why are you regretting it now? Regretting marrying me back then? Now you want to be together with this Dong Ming's mother." Ouyang Shi said fiercely, her voice becoming louder. "How could it be? Don't you know how I treat you? I treat you wholeheartedly. Why are you so narrow-minded? There's really nothing between me and Dong Mingyang. We broke up at that time and haven't contacted each other for so many years. That day, it wasn't your idea, so I won't contact her again. When she enters the mansion, you have the final say. Even if you kill her, I won't say anything." Wei Dahai lowered his voice and coaxed. "That sounds nice. Let's see how you are going to deal with such a thing." Ouyang refused to stop and said angrily. Wei Dahai reached out and held Ouyang in his arms and said gently, "I'll handle it. Don't worry. It'll be fine. You'll be in charge of the shop in the future. I'm most relieved when you handle it." Seeing that he had been very docile, Ouyang's face became a little better. She thought for a while and said, "If Princess Chen insists on fighting with us, what should we do? Dong Mingyang might have begged her. Are we really going to waste our time like this? Prince Chen is going back to the capital." Wei Dahai had thought it through along the way, so he said without hesitation, "If you beg her, let Dong Mingyang die." These words caused Ouyang Shi to smile. She pulled on his sleeve and tenderly said, "Husband, if we are of one heart and one mind, then we can fight for a better future for our children." When that time comes, you won't just be a small official. At the very least, you will be a first-rank official. That will be our good days. She was not good-looking and was old, but she pretended to be so gentle. Her affectionate eyes also showed a little shyness. Wei Dahai hurriedly moved his eyes away, patted her on the back, and then stood up. I'll go to the study to think about it. I'm afraid that Princess Chen will have a follow-up. It's so late, and you still want to go. Why don't you rest first? Ouyang's face darkened again. She shook her sleeves and stood up. Well. Okay. Although Wei Dahai wanted to leave, he didn't dare to really leave, for fear of making trouble again. Ouyang was not Dong Mingyang, who was not easy to deal with. Everything he had now depended on her. He really didn't dare to disobey her. Even if he didn't like her, he had to endure it. End of this chapter. Chapter 1070. Empress Dowager, the weather is good today and the flowers in this garden are in full bloom. A walk can make you feel better. Prince Chen is about to return to the capital city. Don't worry. Prince Chen has always cared about you. Knowing that your birthday is coming, he will go as fast as he can. Nanny Wei accompanied Empress Dowager to walk in the imperial garden with a smile. A large group of palace maids and eunuchs followed them with all kinds of things in their hands. No, he doesn't need to hurry. He has just recovered a little, and he can't stand fatigue. Empress Dowager sighed and said. She really didn't want Chu Luchen to hurry. Your Highness, Prince Chen, knows that Empress Dowager cares so much about Prince Chen. Your Highness has always been filial. Even if you can't make it in time, you will definitely ask Princess Chen to prepare a satisfactory congratulatory gift for you. Your Highness, you know Empress Dowager's intention best. Even I need your advice sometimes. Nanny Wei said with a smile and praised Chu Luchen very much. How can he be as good as you? He just has some intention. He is in poor health, and there are few people who can love him. This child has a hard life. Empress Dowager was happy at first, and then sighed. If I don't love him, he will be really pitiful. With the Empress Dowager around, how can Prince Chen be pitiful? Now he has married Princess Chen. I think Princess Chen is smart. Although she is a little young, she is an experienced woman. Since she came to the capital city, she has been admirable. Nanny Wei praised Xiao Wanru calmly. She was young and experienced many things, so she must be smart. 3 years ago, when she came to the capital city, what she did was good, but she reminded Empress Dowager that Xiao Wanru was a little too sophisticated. These words were just a warning. Empress Dowager would say it sometimes. Nanny Wei was Empress Dowager's henchman, so Empress Dowager would not feel that she had crossed the line when she said such words. She just sighed and said, Princess Chen is always a little young, and she didn't grow up in Marquis Xing's mansion. The Empress Dowager was actually more interested in older young ladies of aristocratic families. Furthermore, they were young ladies of aristocratic families who grew up by their parents' side. With the upbringing of their parents and the rules of aristocratic families, no matter how bad they were, they wouldn't be too bad. Empress Dowager, don't worry. Princess Chen is very good. Prince Chen chose Princess Chen because he likes her. Since His Highness is happy, he will definitely thank you, Imperial Grandmother. Nanny Wei seemed not to hear the regret in Empress Dowager's words and still kept praising her. After all, she is still a little young, and her etiquette is a little poor. She lost her mother and has no one to educate her. It's not a big deal that she was just a miss of Marquis Xing's mansion in the past. Now she has become Prince Chen's princess, and her words and deeds represent Prince Chen's face. If anything wrong happens, it will definitely be blamed on Chen. Hearing Nanny Wei's words, the Empress Dowager became more and more worried inside again. The more she thought about it, the more worried she was. It was said that Chen was not favored in Ningyuan Army General's mansion for so many years. The mistress of the family was Madame D, and the Empress Dowager would worry about whether Chen could teach her or not. Madame D was not a good person. She was unvirtuous and let Ning Yuan army general bear such a big cuckold. Could the child taught by her be good? If she didn't teach her, the child taught by the servants would be even worse. She didn't think about it before, and now the more she thought about it, the more regretful she was. If she had known it earlier, she would have waited and waited. No matter what, she had to wait until Chu Luyue and Chu Liuzhou got married. Maybe she could find a better one and Chen might also find a more suitable one. Now she could only do this. Thinking of this, she felt depressed. Empress Dowager, what's that? When Nanny Wei was about to say something, she suddenly saw something red under a cluster of flowering trees. The flowers on that flowering tree were light yellow. They were big and beautiful, and there was no red in them at all. Nanny Wei walked over curiously and bent down to pick it up. Empress Dowager, it's a note. Nanny Wei said as she walked back, and then muttered to herself, why is it red? She walked to the Empress Dowager and opened the folded note. Immediately, a few words suddenly appeared in front of them. The Empress Dowager frowned. It turned out to be a contract. The red part on it was the part that had been printed with oil. How could such a thing fall here? She looked at the last place signed on it, Butterfly Clothing Shop. Who dropped this? It actually fell here. The Empress Dowager said. She had been in charge of a family before she got married, so she naturally knew that this kind of contract was very important. She didn't know who was so careless that he actually dropped the contract here. If it rained, the paper would be useless. Butterfly Clothing Shop. Nanny Wei also read it, and then murmured, why do I feel that this name is a little familiar? I also feel that it is very familiar. The Empress Dowager nodded. She also felt so. Nanny Wei thought for a moment, and suddenly her eyes lit up, Empress Dowager, I remember. Isn't this the shop that Princess Chen mentioned? She said it yesterday. Can you still remember, Empress Dowager? Reminded by Nanny Wei, the Empress Dowager also remembered it and nodded repeatedly. Yes, yes, there is such a thing. It is indeed that shop. Princess Chen also said that the shopkeeper of the shop met an ungrateful man who was ungrateful. Now he coveted her shop and even wanted her to marry into that mansion. What? This is... The Empress Dowager suddenly took the note from Nanny Wei's hand and looked at it carefully. This is not an ordinary contract. This is... I don't quite understand it. It seems to be a mortgage. Nanny Wei was shocked. She came over to take a look and said, Empress Dowager, don't worry. It's not what you think. It's not what I think. I didn't expect. The Empress Dowager was so angry that her face turned livid and she couldn't even finish her words. If it was just a mortgage, it was not a problem. The problem was that the shop was only mortgaged for such a small amount of money. It was obvious that the shopkeeper deliberately took advantage of the shopkeeper's crisis to force the shopkeeper to sign such a contract. Needless to say, this contract was accidentally dropped here when Princess Chen entered the palace yesterday. She looked at the paper and found that it was indeed a little damp, but it didn't look like it was sprinkled with water. It should be the morning dew that stained the paper. If it wasn't damp, the folded paper wouldn't be able to see through the red ink inside. The red ink wouldn't show through, and Nanny Wei wouldn't notice it at a glance. It was obviously dropped yesterday and was thrown under the flower tree overnight. Empress Dowager, there must be another reason for this. Princess Chen would not do such a thing as bullying others. Princess Chen looks like a good person and speaks gently. Seeing that the Empress Dowager was angry, Nanny Wei hurriedly persuaded in a low voice, Empress Dowager, you are not in good health. You may be hurt by anger. If Prince Chen returns to the capital, I can't explain it to him. Even now, you're still speaking up for her. If she was a good person, she wouldn't have such a contract. You even said that the shopkeeper of the shop was pitiful, and now she's making such a contract. It's obvious that she's coveting the shop. She really isn't taught by her mother, she's actually so petty. The Empress Dowager was very angry. She shook the note in her hand and said angrily. The dignified Princess Chen coveted the shop and deliberately suppressed the shop when the shopkeeper was in urgent need of money. She could buy a shop at such a low price. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she wanted to laugh. She really thought that she didn't know anything. Empress Dowager, don't be angry. I will ask Princess Chen to come here for you and let Princess Chen explain herself, okay? Nanny Wei persuaded again. Don't go. Even if you go, she will have something to say. No wonder she purposely came to me yesterday and said all these things. She said it was the fault of others. Now it seems that she said it on purpose. Come to me and report it. Even if something happens, it can't be blamed on her. She should have prepared something for me to hear. I don't want to listen to such lies. The more the Empress Dowager thought about it, the angrier she became. When she connected the things before and after, everything was connected. Otherwise, why would she specially come here yesterday? The Empress Dowager didn't suspect Xiao Wanru before, so she didn't feel anything wrong. Now that she was suspected, she was suspicious everywhere. She deliberately wanted to occupy the shop of a small family. She didn't look like a Princess Chen at all. Empress Dowager. Nanny Wei said. Go out of the palace and check it out. I don't believe what she said anymore. Go and ask it clearly. If it was really done by Princess Chen, ask Princess Chen to settle the matter herself. Don't let her occupy other people's shop. It's their shop, so it has nothing to do with her. The Empress Dowager was really angry and urged repeatedly. Yes, Empress Dowager, don't be angry. I will go out of the palace to check it out immediately and then report to you first. Or do you want to go to Princess Chen? Nanny Wei repeatedly said yes. If she really has ulterior motives, you don't have to go back to the palace. Go to Prince Chen's mansion. If there is anything, let her ask me. The Empress Dowager said angrily. Yes, Empress Dowager. I will help you go back first and then go outside to inquire about it. Nanny Wei was happy in her heart, but she showed a concerned look. I still want to stay here. If I go back at this time, it will be even more difficult for me to calm down. Find out the portraits I prepared for Prince Chen and send them to the attic in front. I will choose a few virtuous and outstanding young ladies for Chen. Since she can't afford the position of Prince Chen, she can't take it. The Empress Dowager pointed to a pavilion in front. She was really angry. She felt that it was really thoughtless to choose a princess for Chu Luchen at that time. She only wanted to make Chu Luchen satisfied, but she didn't think that Chu Luchen was still young. It was inevitable that he would be blinded by flowers. After all, he was just a young man and didn't have a deep vision. After seeing Xiao Wanru's true colors this time, she must ask Chen, to choose a few good misses to marry into the mansion. As for the position of Princess Chen, it might not necessarily be Xiao Wanru's. Chapter 1071. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she wanted to choose a new concubine for Chu Luchen. Nanny Wei got the order from the Empress Dowager and hurried out of the palace. It was easy to find out the location of Butterfly Clothing Shop. Before Nanny Wei let the carriage go to Butterfly Clothing Shop, she parked in an alley. Looking at the customers coming and going, she was very satisfied. It was indeed a good shop, and it seemed that they had made a lot of money. Wei Dehai came out of nowhere. When he saw Nanny Wei, he hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Then he whispered to Nanny Wei, "Auntie, wait a moment. I'll go and invite them over. We can't let Princess Chen's servants see them. Otherwise, there will be another accident, and Yang Ming won't dare to tell the truth. She's too presumptuous. This is the Emperor's territory. Does she really dare to use the guards of the prince's mansion?" Nanny Wei didn't expect Xiao Wanru to be so arrogant and said angrily. She still felt a little guilty before. After all, what happened before was not true, but now she was a little angry. If Princess Chen was such a person, it would be better to get rid of her, so as not to bring trouble to Prince Chen. It's because Princess Chen is bolder in the territory of the Emperor. Everyone knows that the Empress Dowager and the Emperor dote on Prince Chen very much. Princess Chen also takes advantage of Prince Chen's power. Please wait a moment. I'll be right there, Wei Dahai said. He had already prepared everything and went to Butterfly clothing shop under Nanny Wei's angry gaze. When he entered the shop assistants inside recognized him and ignored him. They still did what they had been doing. The shopkeeper had already told them not to care about his business and not to let him come to the shopkeeper's room. They could let him go anywhere else as long as he didn't disturb the normal operation of Butterfly clothing shop. But there was still a clever shop assistant who reported Wei Dahai's arrival to Nanny Dong. Madame Dong froze for a moment. She didn't think that Wei Dahai could say anything to her at this time. The matter of the shop had been pushed to Princess Chen, and it was no longer something that she could change. Did Wei Dahai not want to stop? Did he want to make trouble again? He rolled his eyes and whispered a few words to the informant. The informant nodded and left. Wei Dahai walked around the store unhurriedly for a while, but he didn't buy anything. Finally, he turned to a corner and met a woman in her 30s. Wei Dahai seemed to know her. After the two exchanged a few words, they walked out together. The shop assistant who was watching them watched them leave together and went to a carriage deep in the alley. The waiter came in quickly and reported to Madame Dong, shopkeeper, Mr. Wei took a middle-aged woman out and went to a carriage in the alley on our right. The curtain of the carriage was down. I didn't see clearly who was inside, but I vaguely felt that it was a woman. A middle-aged woman? Who is she? Madame Dong was stunned and asked. I asked the people in the shop, and they all said that they didn't know her. They said that this middle-aged woman had been here for a while, and she didn't look like she was from a rich family. She was dressed like the shopkeeper, and her appearance was similar. When I was in the shop, the employees were talking about her. They all said that when she stood next to the shopkeeper, they looked like sisters. The waiter said. The so-called sisters meant that they looked similar, and they were taken out of the shop. If they dressed like each other, could they be regarded as their own? Madame Dong's face changed, and she remembered Princess Chen's warning. Thinking of her own words, she immediately stood up in shock and said, I'll go and have a look. She left the waiter and ran out alone. There were several carriages in the row. The waiter followed her out and quietly pointed to one of the carriages. The style of the carriage was very ordinary, as if it were the most common carriage on the street. There was a curtain hanging in front of it. Madame Dong had clothing materials in her shop, so she was very sensitive to materials. The material used for the curtain was definitely not ordinary. It just looked ordinary, but in fact, it was very unusual. It could even be said that the material used by ordinary people to make clothes was not as good as the curtain. Even if she didn't touch it herself, Madame Dong already knew in her heart. Such a curtain could only be used by rich and noble people. Madame Dong had seen Wei Dahai's carriage several times before. Although the carriage was much wider, the curtain on it was definitely not as good as the curtain in front of her. The people inside were not ordinary. What did Wei Dahai want to do? Could it be that he was plotting something again? After thinking for a while, she waved her hand to call the waiter over and whispered something in his ear. The waiter nodded, turned around, and ran out. He called a carriage on the side of the road and asked the carriage to go to Prince Chen's mansion. The waiter went to report. Madame Dong thought for a while, returned to the shop, went upstairs, and turned to the entrance of the alley. Sure enough, she saw the carriage she had just noticed. Standing behind the curtain, she stared at the carriage closely. Madame Dong could feel that there was something strange about it. In the carriage, the middle-aged woman bowed deeply to Nanny Wei. Before she got up, her face was already covered with tears, and her voice was choked with sobs. Please, please save me, Nanny. Are you Dong Mingyang? Nanny Wei looked at the Dong Mingyang in front of her and asked slowly. I am Dong Mingyang. Dong Mingyang said. Get up and talk. Nanny Wei said gently. Mingyang, get up first. I will take care of you. I will never let you be forced by Princess Chen. Your shop will be preserved. Wei Dahai said with concern. He reached out and helped Dong Ming's mother to sit down at the side. Nanny Wei looked up and down at Dong Mingyang a few more times. She felt that Dong Mingyang was pleasing to the eye, so her voice became softer and softer. Do you really want to reconcile with Dahai? Nanny, he and I, we are childhood sweethearts. The misunderstanding at the beginning has been solved. It is fate that we meet again. We are not young anymore. Even if it is for ourselves, we should let go of our past enmity. How can we not think it through? Nanny, please help us. Dong Mingyang wiped her tears and said. Does Princess Chen really want to rob your shop? Nanny Wei was silent for a while and asked slowly. Princess Chen thinks that this shop is very good and very suitable for her, so she blackmailed me with the matter of Commandery Princess Tianyuan and asked me to buy the shop to her. This is to give her an explanation. Otherwise, she will definitely stir up trouble and make my shop unable to continue. Nanny, I only have one daughter. We believe in fate. We have been doing business carefully for so many years, and it is not easy for us to save so much money. Dong Mingyang cried more and more aggrieved. Her helpless and indignant voice reminded Nanny Wei of the helpless days when she was a child, and she felt more and more sorry for her. Well, I know about it. This chapter is not over. Please turn to the next page. Well, since it is Princess Chen who takes advantage of her power to bully others, I will report it to her impartially. You can go back now and do business as usual. When the matter is settled, you can enter the Wei's mansion. Nanny Wei said gently. Thank you, Nanny. Thank you, Nanny. Wei Mingyang was so excited that she wanted to kneel down again, but she was stopped by Wei Dahai. Don't kneel. Auntie is a kind-hearted person. She can't bear to see people like you being bullied. You go back first. I will talk with Auntie for a while. Okay, then I'll go first. Wei Mingyang wiped her tears, nodded, and gently bowed to Nanny Wei again. Then she got off the carriage and went straight to Butterfly Clothing Shop, as if she was really the shopkeeper of Butterfly Clothing Shop. Madame Dong, who was behind the curtain upstairs, had been paying attention to them. When she saw the middle-aged woman come out, she called a waiter and asked him to go downstairs to greet her. She still hid in the blind corner and continued to monitor the movement below. Wei Dahai came out after a while. When he got off the carriage, he looked around. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he went to the back of the alley. There were a few carriages parked there, and one of them was his. After getting on the carriage of his mansion, the coachman turned a corner and left from the back of the alley. Nanny Wei's carriage stopped for a while, and then the coachman drove the carriage away. Madame Dong stood high and looked far. Seeing that the carriage seemed to be heading for Prince Chen's mansion, she frowned tightly. The princess was right. This matter was far from over. Wei Dahai was so bold that he actually dared to go against Princess Chen. It seemed that this Wei Dahai was not as useless as he thought. If he guessed correctly, this carriage should belong to the palace. Fortunately, she had sent someone to inform Princess Chen just now. Even if someone from the palace suddenly went there, the princess must have a way to deal with it. Madame Dong always believed in Xiao Wanru. Although she was worried, she did not panic. She came out from the curtain and went downstairs to her accounting room. After sitting inside for a while, she saw the shop assistant she had instructed to go out come back. Shopkeeper, that woman doesn't live far away. When she came in, she walked around our store. When she saw that no one was paying attention to her, she left through the back door. I followed her and found that she doesn't live far away. She lives in a courtyard 2 streets away from us. The courtyard isn't big, but the door is tightly shut. I went to inquire about it and heard that there's only one woman living there with a servant woman. I don't know if she's someone's mistress or not. Anyway, the male master of that family rarely comes here, and even if he does, he's very mysterious. I usually don't see him. The shop assistant reported. Do you remember to learn it next time? Madame Dong nodded and asked worriedly. Don't worry, I'm familiar with this area. I won't make a mistake at the intersection. Next time you want to find this woman, I'll take you there. There won't be any mistake. The shop assistant patted his chest and said. Madame Dong nodded and gave a tael of silver to the shop assistant. The shop assistant thanked her and left. In front of Prince Chen's mansion, Nanny Wei's carriage stopped. The coachman stepped forward. The guard at the door stopped the coachman and asked sternly, Who are you? Nanny Wei, who serves the Empress Dowager. She has the Empress Dowager's order. Please inform Princess Chen. The coachman cupped his hands and said. End of this chapter. Chapter 1072. Hearing that she was a servant of the Empress Dowager, the guards did not dare to neglect her and immediately sent someone to report inside. After a while, Yujie appeared at the door, walked to the carriage, and bowed respectfully. Nanny Wei. Prince Chen's mansion is really big. I've waited for so long to see Princess Chen's servant. Nanny Wei asked the coachman to lift the curtain and looked at Yujie with hostility. I'm really sorry, Nanny. Our mansion is indeed a little big. Princess got the news and sent me out, but it was still too late. Nanny Wei asked you to wait outside for a while. Yujie seemed not to hear the anger in Nanny Wei's words and said with a smile. She ordered the coachman to follow her into the mansion. When they arrived at the parking lot of Prince Chen's mansion, Yujie helped Nanny Wei get out of the carriage and said with a smile, Nanny Wei used to come from the side door. What made you come from the front door today? The front door is not like the side door. It's not so convenient to come and go. Nanny Wei is tired. She smiled before saying anything, which made Nanny Wei unable to vent her anger for a while. Is your princess busy? Nanny Wei said in a light tone, ignoring Yujie's previous words. What can our princess be busy with? Prince is not in the mansion. In addition to waiting for our master to come back, our princess can only prepare the birthday gift for the Empress Dowager. Yujie said with a smile. She walked fast and kept leading the way. It was much closer than from the gate to the backyard. The parking lot was located in the inner courtyard. This parking lot was also the place where the wives of the S parked. Nanny Wei ignored Yujie along the way. No matter what Yujie said, she just snorted coldly, which meant that she knew what Yujie meant. In the end, Yujie couldn't say anything, so she had to stop talking and quietly led Nanny Wei to Xiao Wanru. There were needles and thread in Xiao Wanru's room. Many different kinds of embroidery threads were thrown there. Some were gorgeous, and some were dark. There were also a lot of brocades on the table on the side. There was also an unfinished table screen, which was not big but very exquisite. It was basically ready, but there was still a line at the corner. The sewing thread was dragged outside, and there were a few maids helping in the room. Xiao Wanru was holding a needle and thread in her hand. Hearing that Nanny Wei had come, she put down the thread and turned around with a smile. Her delicate little face was so beautiful that even Nanny Wei, who had seen many beauties in the imperial palace, had to admire that Princess Chen was unique. However, even though she was so beautiful, her heart was quite dark. For the sake of money, Nanny Wei could even do that kind of thing. Nanny Wei was also very angry with Xiao Wanru. She had been criticized by Wei Dehai before, so she really couldn't laugh in front of Xiao Wanru. Fortunately, she had been in the imperial palace for a long time, so she showed a fake smile on her face. She took 2 steps forward and was about to salute Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru hurriedly stepped forward to support Nanny Wei. She didn't even dare to make a sound and pulled Nanny Wei to sit down in a chair on the side. Princess Chen, is this prepared for the Empress Dowager? Nanny Wei raised her eyebrows, looked at the table screen on it, and asked. What do you think, Nanny Wei? Xiao Wanru asked with a smile. She was obviously very satisfied. Princess Chen has chosen a good one. The Empress Dowager will definitely be satisfied. Nanny Wei praised with a faint look. Nanny Wei, You have been serving Imperial Grandmother for a long time, so you must understand Imperial Grandmother's intention. Nanny Wei, please give me some advice. What do you think needs to be improved? Xiao Wanru sincerely asked for advice. Nanny Wei tilted her head and looked at it. Then she reached out to pick it up and turned it around. She said, Princess Chen's tabletop is very beautiful. The Empress Dowager will definitely be satisfied with such a beautiful tabletop. The Empress Dowager is old and likes some gorgeous things. She hopes to see young girls dressed jubilantly and look very outstanding. She looked down at the edge of the table screen and said, Princess Chen's table screen is so exquisite and the embroidery pattern is so beautiful. The Empress Dowager must like it very much. If we can change it here, it will be even better. Nanny Wei pointed at the edge of the table screen. There was a rim there, which was not very long, which made the table screen more elegant. The rim, which was neither too long nor too short, was actually just right. Nanny Wei, do you mean to make the rim wider? Xiao Wanru didn't understand what Nanny Wei meant at first. After thinking about it with her head tilted, her eyes lit up. Older people like to see the younger generation make the table screen brighter and more festive. Nanny Wei said with a smile. Therefore, if the rim was smaller, it should be bigger and more gorgeous. But if it was done in this way, it would seem that the table screen was the main one. The pattern on the table screen above could not suppress the rim, and it would seem that the rim was the main one. There was a difference in the relationship between the arrangement of the embroidered table screen and the other accessories. Xiao Wanru tilted her head and looked at it again. She looked a little confused and seemed to feel that it was not good. Your Highness, you can do whatever you want. Anyway, as long as it is a gift from Princess Chen, the Empress Dowager will definitely like it. The Empress Dowager likes Prince Chen the most and loves Princess Chen very much. Nanny Wei said with a smile. Chu Luchen was the reason why the Empress Dowager valued Xiao Wanru so much. In fact, this situation was not good for women. If Chu Luchen didn't like Xiao Wanru, she would have no one to support her. It was a must for every new daughter-in-law to please her husband's family, especially such a high-status husband. What's more, this was the Empress Dowager. She couldn't let the Empress Dowager love her all the time. She had to make the Empress Dowager value her very much. In this way, even if Princess Chen had some new concubines, Xiao Wanru would have someone to rely on. Then we'd better change it. Chu Lu, go and pick out some colorful rims. Let me see. I want big and bright ones. Xiao Wanru immediately ordered Chu Lu. Chu Lu nodded, put down the scissors in her hand, and went to the pile of brocade colorful threads to pick the rims. Your Highness, what do you think of this one? Chu Lu found a bright red rim from the inside. The embroidery was twice as long as the original one, which looked cumbersome and didn't match the elegant color on the brocade screen at first glance. Nanny Wei, please help me take a look. Xiao Wanru said hesitantly. She looked up at Nanny Wei and seemed to want her to make a decision. If Princess Chen thinks it's good, then it's good. I'm just a servant and can't really make a decision for Princess Chen. Nanny Wei refused with a smile. How could she help Xiao Wanru decide on the rims? If she really used such a rim, the Empress Dowager would not only dislike it but also be angry. How could a mistress who couldn't even match the rims be a good mistress? She was afraid that the entire Prince Chen's mansion would be in a mess. Then, choose another one. Xiao Wanru looked at the bright red rims and said helplessly. Nanny Wei nodded with a smile. She didn't say yes or no, but just let Xiao Wanru choose by herself. The previous one was excellent. If it was matched with a long, big, and beautiful one, in fact, it was not suitable. No matter what she sent to the Empress Dowager would not like it, especially now that the Empress Dowager was not satisfied with Princess Chen. In addition, Princess Chen did not do anything good, so she was even more dissatisfied. Her nephew was right. Since she was against Princess Chen, she couldn't let her get the upper hand. Her many years of experience in the palace also told Nanny Wei that if she wanted to step on someone, she should step on him. She should step on him so hard that he would never have a chance to rise again. Otherwise, he might become a big trouble in the future. Both Wei Dahai and Nanny Wei thought so in this regard. The second one she chose was still gorgeous with big embroidery. Although it was better than the previous one, it was not much better. Looking at Princess Chen's satisfied expression, Nanny Wei sneered in her heart. Although the Empress Dowager also appreciated young people's gorgeous clothes, it also included Princess Chen. Prince Chen liked elegant clothes all year round. In the eyes of the Empress Dowager, her best grandson was elegant and refined. If Xiao Wanru had nothing to do with Prince Chen, the Empress Dowager would like her to wear bright red clothes on this day. However, Xiao Wanru was now Princess Chen. Wearing clothes that did not match Prince Chen, even if Prince Chen was not present, the Empress Dowager would not like it. Moreover, there was also this table and screen that did not distinguish between the main and secondary ones, which would definitely make the Empress Dowager feel disgusted. Nanny Wei's words successfully set 2 traps for Xiao Wanru. She didn't believe that Princess Chen could avoid it. Even if she could avoid the table and screen, she couldn't avoid the clothes and accessories. The Empress Dowager should be choosing the portraits of the daughters of aristocratic families now. After she went back, she would definitely give the Empress Dowager some advice and let the Empress Dowager choose a few powerful daughters, so that Princess Chen in front of her could not suppress her and finally fell out of favor and ended up in a miserable situation. Nanny Wei had this idea. At this time, she was not in a hurry. She quietly watched Xiao Wanru and her maid busy, and even showed a smile on her face. It seemed that she was very satisfied with the clothes Xiao Wanru had chosen just now. However, she did not agree with it, which was her prudence as the Empress Dowager's personal nanny. After being busy for a while, Xiao Wanru suddenly seemed to think of Nanny Wei. She hurriedly put down the scarf in her hand and said to Nanny Wei with a humble smile, "Nanny Wei, I'm really sorry to leave you aside." "Nanny Wei, what's the matter today?" "It's nothing important." The Empress Dowager remembered what Princess Chen said about the butterfly clothing shop yesterday, so she specially sent me to tell her. The Empress Dowager thinks that the butterfly clothing shop is good, so she asked Princess Chen not to interfere in it. Nanny Wei said politely with a smile. Xiao Wanru was stunned. She blinked her clear eyes and asked after a long while, "Imperial Grandmother, do you mean that the Empress Dowager has taken a fancy to this shop?" "I really don't know what the Empress Dowager means. I just sent her a message. Now that the message has been sent, I'll go back first." Nanny Wei stood up and said goodbye. "Nanny Wei, please wait." Xiao Wanru stood up and bowed to Nanny Wei. "Nanny Wei, I have another question. I wonder if Nanny Wei can answer my doubts." "Princess Chen, you are still young. Sometimes you may not know the rules. You can only ask what you should ask, and you'd better not ask what you shouldn't ask." Nanny Wei stood still and glanced at Xiao Wanru with a trace of sarcasm in her eyes. Even if Princess Chen was Princess Chen, so what? She couldn't scare her with just one sentence. Chapter 1073. "Nanny Wei, what do you mean?" Xiao Wanru's face darkened. "Your Highness, I've made it very clear. If you really want to buy this shop, you can go to the Empress Dowager to plead for it," Nanny Wei said with a low smile. After saying that, she walked out. When she reached the door, she suddenly stopped and said, "Your Highness, I'm tired, so I'm going to enter the palace from the side door. Please send someone to inform the coachman and ask him to wait in the original place." After saying that, she walked to the side door with ease. Nanny Wei often came to Prince Chen's mansion. In the past, when she sent things for the Empress Dowager, she always went through the side door. Yu Jie was so angry that her face turned livid. Looking at Nanny Wei's back, she almost couldn't help rushing over and holding her back. Xiao Wanru sat down extremely calmly, slightly raised the corners of her mouth, and said to Yu Jie with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you really angry?" "Your Highness, she has gone too far. Even if she is a servant of the Empress Dowager, you are still Princess Chen. She, an old servant, can't ruin you." Yu Jie turned around, put down the curtain, and said angrily. She has seen Wei Dahai before. It seems that she really has something to do with Wei Dahai. I have underestimated Wei Dahai. I didn't expect that he has such great ability to get in touch with Nanny Wei. When I mentioned Butterfly Clothing Shop yesterday, Nanny Wei looked strange. There is something wrong with it. Xiao Wanru said slowly, pushed away the fence in front of her, and said, just put up the original fence. Since she knew that Nanny Wei came with ill intentions, Xiao Wanru had certainly prepared for it. The fence was just to test Nanny Wei. Now it seemed that Nanny Wei had great malice against her. Nanny Dong had sent a waiter to report what he had seen clearly. He even said that the middle-aged woman came out of Butterfly Clothing Shop. She was dressed like Nanny Dong, and even her age was similar to Nanny Dong's. It could be seen that she deliberately imitated Nanny Dong. She deceived Nanny Wei with a fake, but if Nanny Wei hadn't been prejudiced against her, she wouldn't have been so easily fooled. Granny Wei's surname was Wei, and so was Wei Dahai's. It was easy to guess the relationship between them. After Nanny Wei left the palace, she went to Butterfly Clothing Shop. Wei Dahai had already known the news and waited outside. He also prepared a fake for her. It could be seen that he had already known that Nanny Wei was going to leave the palace. Nanny Wei said that she came here under the order of the Empress Dowager, which meant that the Empress Dowager should have known it. On the other hand, it meant that Nanny Wei told the Empress Dowager something greedy or asked someone to prepare some evidence for her. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she sent her out to investigate. She didn't enter the house to investigate and still listened to Wei Dahai's words. Then, she rushed to his house and was full of malice towards him. It could be seen that she was bewitched by Wei Dahai. Wang Fei, Wei Mama was cheated. Why didn't you make it clear? Chu Li's attitude was relatively mild. She felt that it was reasonable for Nanny Wei to behave like this. I have been prejudiced against you for a long time. No matter how much I say, I won't think that you are right. Nanny Wei won't listen to me now. Xiao Wanru slowly put away her smile, her face darkened, and her watery eyes became cold. She had never been a kind person. Since Nanny Wei wanted to harm her and believed in Wei Dahai, she didn't need to explain. Nanny Wei went to Butterfly Clothing Shop today and had confirmed that she had slandered her in front of the Empress Dowager. If Nanny Wei was really a good person, after listening to Wei Dahai's words, the first thing she should do was to verify it. If she was not careful about this kind of thing, she might be doomed eternally. Nanny Wei believed what she heard and followed Wei Dahai's order to deal with her. That was evil. In this world, many people would make explanations for their actions. They all thought that they were right, but they didn't think clearly before acting and had various reasons afterwards. Xiao Wanru had always been a cold person. She would not sacrifice herself for others' misunderstandings. Your Highness, Nanny Wei works for the Empress Dowager. She came from Butterfly Clothing Shop and went straight to our mansion. She just showed off to you. Does it mean that the Empress Dowager is also displeased with you? When she left yesterday, it was obvious that the Empress Dowager liked you very much. Yujia also restrained her anger and began to worry. Nanny Wei was different from others. She was the Empress Dowager's most trusted person. Although Prince Chen was noble, he was the most filial to the Empress Dowager. It doesn't matter. Xiao Wanru said, let's wait and see. Make another set of the clothes you chose before, and the color should be lighter. Your Highness, the Empress Dowager likes festive clothes, and it's her birthday. Your clothes look festive and look very good in them. Why do you want to make another set of lighter ones? Yujia said in confusion. The set of clothes was extremely rich and magnificent. The flying peony patterns and the bright red clothes made Xiao Wanru's face as white as jade. However, it was not the kind of bloodless paleness. There was a touch of pink on her face, and her skin was as clear as jade. Such a set of clothes stunned the maids at that time, and then they all praised it. Most of Xiao Wanru's clothes were light, and she had never worn such a flamboyant bright red. Moreover, she wore it with the flowers of wealth and honor. In fact, It was very easy to wear such clothes. However, it made Xiao Wanru look extremely gorgeous in it. Such a color, such a pattern, and it was the Empress Dowager's birthday, so the Empress Dowager would definitely like it. Is it because of what Nanny Wei said just now? Chu Lu blinked, thought for a moment, and said with a frown, but this servant thinks that she was talking about the edge of the screen. She deliberately said that to make you change the one that is suitable, and to match it with an unsuitable one that is also gaudy. The edge is not suitable. Can you see that? Xiao Wanru picked up the scarf selected at the end. The long lace with tassels was also very beautiful when looked at alone, but it was obviously not the same as the screen on the table. Anyone with a little feeling would feel that it was inappropriate. Nanny Wei had been in the palace for so long, so how could she know such obvious words? Even if she was bewitched by her for a while, she would definitely realize it after a while. Even if she didn't realize it, the maids would see that it was inappropriate. Nanny Wei was making a diversion. The important thing was that she should wear gorgeous clothes. However, after hearing Nanny Wei's words, Xiao Wanru felt that it was inappropriate. Xiao Wanru suddenly remembered that once the Empress Dowager sent Chu Luchen a few pieces of clothes that had been made in the palace before. They were all very elegant. Even if there were some decorative patterns, they were not the most eye-catching. She chose some embroidery patterns made of gold thread. They were elegant and noble, but not gorgeous. Chu Liuchen's clothes did not have such gorgeous clothes. If she wore such gorgeous clothes, she would not match Chu Luchen. The Empress Dowager would definitely not like her and Chu Luchen to be completely incompatible. A trace of coldness flashed in her eyes, and her eyes suddenly became cold. Gorgeous? Her skin was very white, and her lips had always been gorgeous. In the last life, she was driven out of the Wen's mansion by old Madame Wen and Gu Shishu because of this reason. She was gorgeous, so she was not the same type as Chu Luchen. If she wore more gorgeous clothes, she would definitely be more different from Chu Luchen. They were two very conspicuous types. Others might not care much about it, but the Empress Dowager was different. The Empress Dowager had always cared about Chu Liuchen's health. If someone stirred up trouble, it was very likely to cause trouble. If the Empress Dowager drove her out of the palace in public, how would she have the face to occupy the position of Prince Chen in the future? Moreover, she would definitely be punished later. In his previous life, he had been chased out of his house by such a ridiculous reason and became homeless. In this life, she actually met it again. The Empress Dowager led her to put her hands on the gorgeous clothes. She was going to ruin her. The palace was not the Prime Minister's mansion. The Prime Minister's mansion could do such a thing. If the Empress Dowager was angry because of it, she would definitely be more severe. If it was in the past, even if the Empress Dowager was not happy, she might not show it in front of others. But now it was different. With Nanny Wei's slanderous words and her carelessness, it would definitely cause a big trouble. Your Highness has always worn light clothes, so how can I wear too much? Make another set of light lotus-colored clothes, and match it with light gold embroidery. Embroider some simple patterns. Gold thread has always been a noble color, so just a little embellishment will not make it look like your status. Xiao Wanru paused and said, I'm Prince Chen, so I should dress the same as your Highness. If your Highness is here, our clothes will also match. No matter whether Chu Luchen was here or not, she should dress according to Chu Liuchen's style. At this time, the two maids also understood. They looked at each other with a lingering fear on their faces. Don't worry, your Highness. I'll go and get a few pieces of cloth first. After you choose them, I'll ask the sewing room to make them quickly. Chu Lu nodded and turned to Xiao Wanru's warehouse. There were many good materials in it. Xiao Wanru nodded. Originally, in order to look gorgeous, the embroidery patterns on the clothes were gorgeous and complicated, but now it was not necessary. She only needed to embroider some simple patterns with gold thread. Gold thread originally represented luxury. If she worked in this way, she could make the clothes in a hurry. Yujie, go and ask Nanny Dong to come here, Xiao Wanru said to Yujie. She still had something to ask Nanny Dong. It was better to be prepared for the imposter. Nanny Wei would definitely make things difficult for her. She had a lot of things to deal with now, so she could only deal with it by remaining unchanged. Nanny Dong came very soon. At the same time, people from Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion came to Prince Chen's mansion with her. Xiao Wanru had asked Rui and Great Elder Princess about the Ministry of Internal Affairs before. Nanny Dong entered the door first and told Xiao Wanru about the imposter. The imposter lived in a courtyard nearby. There was a mistress in the courtyard, who might be Wei Dahai's mistress, and the imposter was probably the wet nurse of that mistress. Chapter 1074. It was Madame Dong who guessed it. After that, she specially asked her shop assistant to inquire about it. When she was about to report it to Xiao Wanru, she met Yujie coming over. Wei Dahai's mistress. This result surprised Xiao Wanru. Yes, this subordinate was just guessing. Wei Dahai is a very cautious person. If there was no relationship, he wouldn't casually find a woman to impersonate me. That family is very mysterious to begin with, and there are very few male leads. This subordinate asked a servant to describe Wei Dahai's appearance, and indeed, someone said it. Madame Dong said. Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and asked, "How long has it been?" I specially inquired about it. It has been several years since he moved here. Although the male master is rarely seen, after a long time, someone will always see him once or twice. Madame Dong said. When she knew that this might be Wei Dahai's mistress, she specially asked the servants to inquire about it in detail. Continue to keep an eye on his mistress, Xiao Wanru said coldly. Since this clue was an unexpected surprise, she said, if there is anything unusual, send someone to report it immediately. As for the rest, just do as before. If Wei Dahai comes, don't pay attention to him. Just do what you have been doing. If he asks about the shop, don't say anything to him. Don't worry, Your Highness. I know. If he comes to ask, I will say that it has nothing to do with him and tell him not to think too much. Xiao has figured it out now and no longer has the intention to be with him. She said that he, her biological father, died early, so I am relieved now, Madame Dong said. She was most worried about Dong Xiao, for fear that Dong Xiao would be fooled by Wei Dahai. This time, after Xiao heard what Wei Dahai said to her, Xiao had no father in her heart. No matter what he said or promised in the future, she would ignore him. Xiao is living too close to you now. Let her move to another place. Although Xiao won't pay attention to Wei Dahai, she is still her father. It's not good for her to be a junior. Let her family temporarily live in a manor outside the city. That way, Wei Dahai won't be able to persuade Xiao and will come up with a vicious scheme against Xiao and you. Xiao Wanru was not as optimistic as Madame Dong thought and arranged. Madame Dong immediately understood Xiao Wanru's meaning and nodded repeatedly. She was so grateful that she was about to kowtow to Xiao Wanru. She broke out in a cold sweat on her back. She really ignored Wei Dahai's character. He was a very despicable person and had no affection for Xiao. In the end, he might really capture Xiao and threaten her. Xiao Wanru asked Yujie to hold her and waved her hand. Nanny Dong, you should be careful. Nothing will happen in the shop, but don't go to places with few people outside the shop. When you go out, ask a waiter to follow you. Wei Dahai is not a simple person. He is not what you see. Madame Dong nodded repeatedly and said, Princess, don't worry. I won't come out if there's nothing important. Even if I come out, I will ask a few men to come with me. I will never act alone, let alone go to that kind of uninhabited place. Wei Dahai is a real villain and a vicious villain. I won't go out unless necessary. Even if I go out, I will ask a few men to go with me. I will never act alone, let alone go to a deserted place. Wei Dahai is a real villain and a vicious one. After instructing Madame Dong, she sent someone to follow Madame Dong to help Dong Xiao move away. Xiao Wanru invited an old steward of Rui and great elder princess's mansion, who was waiting in the wing room. The old steward came in, bowed to Xiao Wanru, and said, "Your Highness, our master was going to come and tell you in person, but there happened to be a guest here. Our master was afraid that you would be anxious, so she specially asked me to come here to tell you about the Department of Internal Affairs." "What do you mean?" Xiao Wanru asked. "Our master said that the Department of Internal Affairs is now in the hands of Marquis Qingzhen. It is Marquis Qingzhen who is in charge of the affairs of the Department of Internal Affairs in the name of management," the old steward said with a smile. The Department of Internal Affairs was in charge of the affairs of the palace. Although it did not have real power in the court, it was of a high rank. It was an idle post at the second level. Those who had always been in charge of the Department of Internal Affairs were either of royal blood or related to the concubines in the harem. Marquis Qing'an's identity was not ordinary. He was the biological brother of the Empress Dowager, and he was also the imperial uncle. "Is he the elder brother of the Empress Dowager?" Even though Xiao Wanru knew it, she still asked. "Yes, our master said that the affairs of the Department of Internal Affairs have been in charge of Marquis Qingzhen for many years. Nothing has happened for so many years. I don't know why you ask about it, Your Highness. If there is something, please tell our master," the old steward of Great Elder Princess's mansion said flatteringly. "Grandma, who are you going to see?" Xiao Wanru suddenly changed the topic and asked. "It's Infanta Yuan and Ruiping Great Elder Princess. In the past, Ruiping Great Elder Princess was not very close to our master. I don't know why she comes to see our master from time to time recently," the old steward answered. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. "Why are you here today?" "It's nothing important. I just want to ask about the doctor here. I heard that there is a miracle-working doctor in Prince Chen's mansion. Infanta Yuan wants to see the miracle-working doctor of Prince Chen's mansion for the wound on her face, but the princess hasn't seen him before, so Ruiping Great Elder Princess brought Infanta Yuan to see our master," the old steward answered cleverly. The so-called miracle-working doctor in Prince Chen's mansion referred to Qi Ju. The miracle-working doctor of Prince Chen's mansion was specially found by the Empress Dowager for Chu Luchen. She specially placed him in Prince Chen's mansion, which meant that Qi Ju was a member of Prince Chen's mansion, not an imperial physician in the imperial palace, and could not be used by anyone. It could be said that anyone who wanted to ask Qi Ju to see a doctor must get Chu Liuchen's consent. This miracle-working doctor was in charge of all Chu Liuchen's medical cases, so his importance was self-evident. Chu Luchen was in poor health, and his medical cases could not be seen casually. Therefore, this miracle-working doctor's status in Prince Chen's mansion was even more extraordinary. "Has the wound on Infanta Yuan An's face not healed?" Xiao Wanru asked in confusion. According to Infanta Yuan An's previous words, it should be Prince Zhou who sent Dr. Chiu there. "It seems that something is wrong. I was outside just now, so I didn't hear it clearly. I only said that it was not very good and wanted to ask the miracle-working doctor of Prince Chen's mansion to see a doctor. Our master said that if it was convenient for the princess, she could ask him to see a doctor. If it was not convenient, forget it. It would not be a good thing to talk about it." The old steward conveyed Rui and Great Elder Princess's words. In the past, the two families were not close. Now that the two families were close, Rui and Great Elder Princess and Infanta Yuan were so humble, so she felt a little embarrassed. However, she did not want to embarrass Xiao Wanru, so she just said this. Xiao Wanru's eyes darkened. It was indeed not good to interfere in this kind of thing. After thinking for a while, she said, "Go and tell Grandma that I'm not in good health. Help me refuse it first and talk about it later." She refused to see guests with the excuse of poor health. She even seldom came to Great Elder Princess's mansion, let alone others. This was also the reason why Infanta Yuan went to Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion first instead of looking for her directly. Now the two families seemed to be on good terms, so it was natural for her to go to Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion to find out what was going on. If she got the princess's consent, she would not be afraid of being refused at the door. The old steward answered. Thinking that she had said what she should say, she said goodbye to Xiao Wanru. Your Highness, if Infanta Yuan An's face hasn't recovered, it may really affect her marriage. Chu Lu came in with a few pieces of satin. She had stood aside and heard the words in the room just now. After the old steward left, she walked in. It's true. When she was in the imperial palace, she still trusted Dr. Chiu very much. She even didn't allow the imperial physicians to apply medicine for her again. Does she not trust him now? Xiao Wanru said to herself. It should be because Dr. Chiu's medicine is useless. Yu Jie curled her lips and said. The doctors she liked were like Mingqiu Nun, but she would never like Dr. Chiu. No matter how good his medical skills were, she would not like such a doctor who had no medical ethics at all. Wang Yishu was killed by Dr. Chiu's superb medical skills. Your Highness, we can't treat Infanta Yuan Pen. No one knows what medicine Dr. Chiu gave her before. If she recovers, it will be Dr. Chiu's credit. If she doesn't, it will be our mansion's fault. Yu Jie turned around and tried to persuade Xiao Wanru. Your Highness, it's not easy to treat Infanta Yuan Pen. Chu Lu also said. Xiao Wanru nodded and had an inexplicable feeling in her heart. Could it be that Dr. Chiu refused to treat Infanta Yuan Pen? Why did Infanta Yuan Pen turn to her for help? However, this matter was not urgent at the moment. Her grandma refused for her and she refused to see any guests. Although she had gone out before, the rumor that she was unwell still existed. Infanta Yuan Pen and Rui, and great elder princess would definitely not rashly turn to see her, so it was much quieter here. The most important thing at the moment was the affairs of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Go and ask Qing to come here. Xiao Wanru had to ask Qing to investigate Marquis Qingzhen of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Xiao Wanru had a bad hunch that the accident of the Empress Dowager in the last life was probably related to Marquis Qingzhen, the elder brother of the Empress Dowager. If there was anyone who could remain safe and sound after the accident of the Empress Dowager's birthday, there was no one else but Marquis Qingzhen. If it were someone else, even if it was not a serious crime, he would at least be dismissed from his official post and never be employed again. However, it was the elder brother of the Empress Dowager, so some things could be explained. When Marquis Qingzhen left the court, he walked casually on the street and looked around. He was not young and didn't like to sit in a carriage all the time. He often got out of the carriage on the street not far from home and asked his family's carriage to go back to the mansion first. Then he walked back leisurely with one or two servants with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked around while walking, which made him very happy. He thought that he was not very capable. In charge of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, in fact, many things were done by his subordinates. He just went to the office every day and signed a few words. If there was nothing important, he would go back to the mansion early and stroll on the street. As he walked, he looked at the goods of various shops. He was in a good mood and smiled, which made him very approachable. Chapter 1075. Marquis Qingzhen knew his own situation. Being a stable Marquis Qingzhen was already very good. As for other things, he could forget about them as he did not have the ability to do so. His sister was the Empress Dowager and his nephew was the Emperor. He had nothing to be dissatisfied with. Marquis Qingzhen was an amiable little old man. He specially walked this street. When people who knew him called out to him, he would cheerfully nod at them. The Ministry of Internal Affairs managed all the miscellaneous things in the palace. Marquis Qingzhen felt that he should take a look at the prices of some goods in the market. This was to prevent the price of goods from the Ministry of Internal Affairs from being too high and making people think that he had benefited from it. Sometimes, after seeing good goods and confirming that there were no hidden dangers, Marquis Qingzhen would order people to send them to the palace. After a few clever merchants learned of this, they became even more polite to Marquis Qingzhen. There were even people who specially waited by the side of the road to see if they could please Marquis Qingzhen and get him to take a liking to their own goods. To be able to send goods to the palace represented not only money but also dignity. Even if it was not frequent, once in a while, they could brag about it for the rest of their lives. For merchants, this was a well-known thing. If he had even done business in the palace, then there was no need to mention the business of others. It could be seen that doing business with him was extremely safe. Thus, Marquis Qingzhen was warmly greeted by many shops along the way. Today, Marquis Qingzhen was in a good mood and walked leisurely. From time to time, he would greet people and enter the shops to look at the goods. However, he did not see anything that suited him, so he just walked by. "Marquis, we have a few new items today. Would you like to take a look?" When he passed by an antique shop, the shopkeeper was already waiting at the door. When he saw Marquis Qingzhen, he called out to him from afar. This was Marquis Qingzhen's favorite shop in the past. Usually, when he passed by this shop, he would definitely enter the door. He could be considered to be familiar with the shopkeeper. As he walked into the shop, he asked, "What items do you have?" "Marquis, you will know after you take a look." The shopkeeper smiled and led Marquis Qingzhen inside. When they sat down in the room for honored guests, the waiter had already brought tea. Marquis Qingzhen took a sip and praised, "This tea is not bad. The Marquis is too polite. Who doesn't know that the tea that the Marquis drinks is bestowed by the palace? The tea that I drink here is just some ordinary tea leaves. It's just for the sake of freshness." The shopkeeper smiled politely. "Your tea is not just new, right?" Marquis Qingzhen took another sip and tasted it. Spring tea was already on the market, and the imperial palace had already sent a new batch of tea over. However, they felt that it was not as good as the tea in front of them. Marquis Qingzhen was surprised. "The Marquis is really amazing, you can even taste such a delicate tea. In fact, these tea leaves are not sold outside, they are grown in my hometown. There are only a few tea trees, so I carefully planted them at home. When it's about time, I invited a young girl to pluck them before the dew falls, and then had an old craftsman stir-fry them on the spot. Although the quantity is not much, it still took a lot of effort. If the Marquis likes it, I can give you a caddy here, any more will be gone." The old shopkeeper was acquainted with Marquis Qingzhen, so he did not mind his words. "All right, then I'll thank you, shopkeeper." Marquis Qingzhen smiled and thanked him. He really felt that the taste was good. It was even better than the one given by the palace. Except that it was someone else's private goods and the quantity was not much. Even if they wanted to supply the palace, it would not be enough. When the time came, it would cause trouble. At the very least, there must be enough goods for the palace. Otherwise, if the concubines of some palace drank it well and wanted to drink more, they might as well not have any. Moreover, there was still the emperor. If the emperor took a liking to it, he might lose his head if he didn't have it. It was not entirely true that the tributes from the palace were the best. When the shopkeeper saw Marquis Qingzhen accept the tea leaves, he clapped his hands twice. The two assistants waiting at the door came in with a few brocade boxes and a few scrolls of paintings. The brocade boxes were opened one by one, and the paintings were placed by the side. The shopkeeper stood up and pointed at Marquis Qingzhen with a smile. "Marquis, what do you think of this jade pendant?" It was not an ordinary jade, but a blood-red jade. It was sparkling and translucent, without a single flaw. Looking at it, one could tell that it was not an ordinary jade. Marquis Qingzhen stood up and picked up the jade pendant. As he looked at it, he nodded. Not bad, very good. This is a good item." He held it up to the window and looked at it again. It was indeed translucent and exquisite. "Marquis, take a look at this." The shopkeeper smiled and pointed at another brocade box. In this brocade box was a ruby. It was a complete piece. It was only slightly cut, but it was still a complete piece. This kind of precious stone was very rare in the market. Looking at the quality, Marquis Qingzhen could not help but praise it. In the third brocade box was a red piece. It was unclear what it was. It looked like a mushroom, but it was not. What is this? Marquis Qingzhen asked curiously. He reached out to take it. Marquis, slow down. This is not how you take it. The shopkeeper reached out to stop him. Then, he carefully carried the brocade box in front of Marquis Qingzhen. Marquis, please smell it. This is blood lingji mushroom. Marquis Qingzhen raised his nose and smelled it. A light medicinal fragrance entered his nose. It immediately cleared his mind and his eyes lit up. The shopkeeper gave him a thumbs up. Marquis, you have a good eye. Isn't this the blood lingji mushroom? Although it is not big, it is not young. Good, good, good. Marquis Qingzhen praised. Marquis, take a look at these paintings. Is there anything that you like? They are definitely authentic. They have all been appraised. Marquis, you do not need to doubt their authenticity. The shopkeeper walked in front of the paintings. He reached out and picked one up. After opening it, he spread it out on the table. Marquis Qingzhen walked over and nodded as he read. He did not have much experience in the court, but he was very interested in calligraphy and paintings. The paintings in front of him were indeed good. After reading one scroll, he looked at the next. These paintings were all very good. Although they were not as good as the previous three, they were still good. Normally, they would not be seen in the market. When he finished reading, Marquis Qingzhen said, "Shopkeeper, I want all of these. Give me a discount, or I will really go bankrupt." Marquis, you must be joking. With your wealth, not to mention these small things, even if you wanted to buy my shop, you would only need to say the word. It would not hurt you at all. With the deal done, the shopkeeper was in a good mood. He flattered Marquis Qingzhen without batting an eyelid. He told the waiter to bring Marquis Qingzhen's manservant to settle the bill. It is the Empress Dowager's birthday. I have always wanted to find a few different things to give to the Empress Dowager. Recently, I have been buying quite a bit, Marquis Qingzhen said. He had asked the shopkeeper to look for these items, but in fact, he had not found them at all. Actually, it was only these few items, but it was already very good to be able to get them. The Marquis is crying about being poor to a small business like ours. How can we survive? Since the Marquis has said so, we will bleed a lot today. How about giving the Marquis a 10% discount? The shopkeeper had a pained expression. All right, all right. Thank you very much, shopkeeper. Marquis Qingzhen laughed. The reputation of this shop was very good. In the past, they did not give discounts, no matter how many items they bought. Right now, it was indeed because of Marquis Qingzhen that they were giving a 10% discount. The items just now were all very valuable. With this, they had earned quite a bit of silver. Marquis, just come to our shop more often in the future, the shopkeeper said cheerfully. As the two of them spoke, the waiter and the manservant had finished calculating the money. Marquis Qingzhen told the waiter to follow his manservant back to Marquis Qingzhen's wife to get the money. He planned to continue shopping. After walking a short distance, he suddenly saw a waiter catch up to him. Marquis, our shopkeeper said that there is another painting. Would you like to take a look? This waiter looked a bit unfamiliar. He was wearing the clothes of the waiter from the shop and had caught up from behind. Marquis Qingzhen felt that the shopkeeper had probably found something suitable. He turned to walk back. Marquis, there is no need to go. Just take a look here. If you don't like it, our shopkeeper can let me take it back. That way, you won't have to make another trip, the waiter said cleverly. The waiter said cleverly. He pointed to the door not far away. Our shopkeeper said that if the Marquis likes it, let me take it back for the Marquis. The matter of the silver can be settled later. Don't tell me that the Marquis is afraid that the Marquis will not pay the bill. The waiter looked like he knew how to talk. He smiled and said everything in one breath, causing Marquis Qingzhen to nod. He turned to look at the door not far away. Although it was not far, it would be troublesome to walk back. For a painting, there was indeed no need to make another trip. With his relationship with the shopkeeper, he was not afraid that he would renege on his debt. It was just a painting. There was indeed no need to go back. Marquis Chen nodded and took the painting. When he opened it, he saw the painting in front of him. His eyes immediately lit up. It had a maple leaf as the background, and it was exactly the painting he had imagined. He had previously asked the painters in the palace to draw similar paintings, but they were always unsatisfactory. The Empress Dowager had 2 sons and raised another. She had 3 sons under her name. In order to express the Empress Dowager's motherly love for her sons, she would draw a mother and 3 princes. The painting in front of him was exactly like that. It was perfectly drawn according to Marquis Chen's wishes. The woman in the painting had a kind face, and she was feeding medicine to a child. This child looked to be the oldest. There was another child who was leaning on the woman's side admiringly, watching his elder brother drink medicine on the bed. The youngest child was playing with a ball, and he turned around to look at his mother and 2 elder brothers in a cute manner. The painting was very appropriate and the mood was perfect. The best part was the maple leaf. It was a painting with maple leaves as the background. Most of it was made of maple leaves. Even the women's clothes, skirts, the children's jackets, and the blankets on the bed were made of maple leaves. There were only a few blank spots with a few strokes of ink. The Empress Dowager had a small hobby. Others might not know, but Marquis Chen was very clear about it. The scene in front of him was very appropriate and definitely suited the Empress Dowager's wishes.